Chapter 1341. The two stone puppets didn't die. If they didn't die, Han Fei's void lines didn't get any soul from them. After they shattered, Han Fei picked up a stone and squeezed it casually, only to see the stone explode. The old turtle said, "Don't pinch it. It's just an ordinary stone." This? Han Fei couldn't help but gasp. An ordinary stone? I can't even cut an ordinary stone with snowmorn? The old turtle said, "This stone puppet is a bit too strong." These were just two ordinary stone statues. They must have been enveloped by the aura of a powerhouse, which was why they were so strong. Even if this emperor were here, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to do this. Han Fei thought to himself, what are you talking about? It has another name called Wang Di Gui, so even an idiot should know what level its master is at. However, Han Fei was a little shocked. There was an emperor's relic on this random island? Maybe the old turtle was right. Under the influence of the aura of a strong master, even an ordinary stone could be so strong. It was probably related to the Taoist heart that the old turtle mentioned. Rumble. Just when Han Fei was about to ask about the Taoist heart, the center of the cave suddenly began to collapse. However, only a small part of the cave collapsed, and a scorching power drifted out from inside. It was abnormally hot, and a pressure rushed out. Han Fei didn't dare to be careless. After fighting this stone puppet, he knew that this might be an emperor's relic. If he was careless, he might die on the spot. This had nothing to do with whether he was on the invincible realm or not. No matter how strong he was, he couldn't beat the enemy. With a flash between Han Fei's eyebrows, Little Black and Little White appeared. Han Fei was about to ask Little White what was going on inside, when he saw Little Black jump out with a swish. Hey. Han Fei was speechless. This little guy was getting more and more disobedient. Was it a place where he could rush in casually? The old turtle said, "Come on in. It's so hot. I'm afraid it's an alien fire." Han Fei thought for a moment. It was possible. The Nuba was burned by an alien fire all year round. The question was, where was the alien fire? Now, Little Black had slipped into the hole. He was afraid that there was pure yang energy inside. With a thought, Han Fei took Little White into Forge the Universe and followed Little Black into the cave. Buzz. The moment Han Fei stepped into this cave, he immediately felt a dry heat, and there was almost no moisture in the air. In front of him was a scale-shaped cavern. It wasn't very large, only about 100 meters in size. In the center of the cave, there was a golden bead that occasionally emitted a dense red light. Before Han Fei could identify what it was, Little Black had already approached it and was circling it. Han Fei shouted, "Son, don't move. Let me have a look first." Han Fei's first reaction was that this was definitely a natural treasure comparable to the sea ice sand. This was because the temperature here had already exceeded the temperature of the lava lake from before. It was terrifyingly high, over 4,000 degrees Celsius, very similar to the blue sea frozen sand. In the face of such a temperature, Han Fei still didn't panic. This was nothing. He even dared to pierce through the bottom of the lava lake, and the instantaneous temperature was comparable to the surface of the sun. How could he be afraid now? Maybe it was because Han Fei's fire pit was relatively high, or maybe it was because the space of this cave was relatively small, but the temperature difference was not very big except within 10 meters of the bead. When Han Fei approached it, information appeared in his eyes. Name, Fire Dragon Bead. Introduction. This is the life bead of the Fire Dragon clan. When the Fire Dragon dies, the bead can't be stored, and it will automatically evolve and burn until it burns out. The Fire Dragon Bead can be used as a rare treasure for fire cultivators. It can be used to refine weapons and cultivate fire resistance. Only fire cultivators can eat it lightly. Effect: if a fire cultivator wears it for a long time, they can cultivate the body of fire, fiery eyes, and other magical powers. Remark: in the state of decay. This Fire Dragon Bead has been burning for a long time, and its effect is less than 10%. As soon as he saw this information, Han Fei was shocked. This is the power of less than 10%? Dragon Bead? Oh my god, I wonder if I can summon a dragon and make a wish with 7 of them. Of course, Han Fei wasn't that stupid. Although this was not a natural spiritual treasure, He didn't know what this fire dragon clan was. However, they were known as the Dragon Clan, and not some other flood dragons or creatures like the great venomous ones. They were real dragons. The old turtle didn't know a dragon at all, so he didn't know this fire dragon bead. He just said, "This thing is a fire attribute treasure and looks quite extraordinary. But it's still much worse than blue-white smoothie. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been able to observe it so closely and still be fine." Han Fei nodded. "I know." Then Han Fei said to Little Black, "Son, can this be eaten? Let's eat it." Little Black responded coolly, "Yes." Little Black opened his mouth wide, and the surrounding hot fire suddenly drilled into Little Black's stomach. The fire dragon bead was naturally swallowed by Little Black. On the surface of Little Black's body, the fire was boiling, and from time to time, the fire dispersed in all directions. Then, with a thought from Han Fei, Little White in Forge the Universe seemed to have a reaction. Immediately, Han Fei released Little White. As a result, the two little fish, one black and one white, circled each other again and swam like the Tai Chi Yin and Yang, which was a sign of their advancement. Sure enough, Little Black and Little White flashed and advanced again, and they didn't stop. Judging from this, after this fire dragon bead, Little Black and Little White would at least advance to level 65. Han Fei thought it would take some time for this advancement. Since there was no danger here, he sat cross-legged and began to recover from his injuries. While Han Fei was cultivating, the outside world was already in an uproar. Zhang Xiaotian, who was defeated by Han Fei, didn't really leave. As a reincarnated expert, knowing that there were treasures hidden under this mountain, how could Zhang Xiaotian give up so easily? The path taken by Han Fei just now should be the best one. It was a place that had been left. But now, he needed to open a new path by himself. As long as the location was basically confirmed, they would know which path to take after trying it out. In the end, they would be able to get there. So, Zhang Xiaotian blew up a few other mountains. After blasting through 3 mountains in a row, Zhang Xiaotian really managed to open up a path for him. When the last mountain was blown up again, blood energy soared into the sky like a pillar of light. With this disturbance, the other living beings that had been madly converging towards this place, if they didn't have a target before this, then they would have a target. But now they had a target. Outside this dragon vein, all kinds of creatures were gathering. Tens of thousands of beasts were already shuttling between the mountains. Demonic plants emerged from the ground and moved to the depths of the mountain. Giant birds were hovering at low altitude, scanning the mountains. The heavenly talents of the Waterwood Heaven, the Blood Sea Divine Wood City, and the Baibei Royal City had all gathered, but at least half of them had come. These people, without exception, all rushed to the mountain that was blown up by Zhang Xiaotian. In fact, it wasn't just these people. All sorts of creatures were also heading towards that place. This was a typical example of someone clearing the way and the latecomers catching up. About 6 hours later, the cave that was emitting blood energy was already surrounded by a sea of creatures. However, the strange thing was that apart from the geniuses of the 3 great forces, no other living beings entered the cave. Instead, they were absorbing the blood chi that was seeping out from the cave. In reality, everyone, including Zhang Xiaotian, knew that this blood energy was extraordinary. But Heaven's prides were smart and greedy. If even a little bit of blood energy was so extraordinary, how extraordinary would the treasure inside be? Therefore, a large group of people had already rushed in. However, the 3 parties had formed their own formations. Now that they had suddenly gathered together, they were once again evenly matched. Prawn Yue, Umbrella Chi, and Su Yi were together. The Baibei Royal City had 5 people. The blood demons of the Blood Sea Divine Wood City were extremely sensitive to blood and flesh. Therefore, there were 6 of them gathered here, and there might be even more coming. The Waterwood Heaven had the least people. There were only 3 of them. At this moment, the 3 forces did not make a move. Before them was a long river. This river was not as simple as an ordinary underground river. The water here was red, and there was a thick blood energy on the surface. It looked very strange. More accurately, this should be called the Blood River. Because no one knew where this river led to. Could they cross it? Therefore, at this moment, the 11 people from the Baibei Royal City and the Blood Sea Divine Wood City were closing in on the 3 from the Waterwood Heaven. Prawn Yue smiled faintly. Aren't you Zergs always fearless of death? Why don't you dare to cross the river now? A one-horned bug buzzed. We Zergs are fearless, but that doesn't mean we are stupid. This river is filled with blood energy. Our senses cannot penetrate it, and we can't see the end. We don't even know where it leads to. Who dares to cross it? Umbrella Chi sneered. Do you think you have a choice? Cross it now or die. Runes flashed under the feet of a blood demon. There are only 3 of you. Do you think you can stop the dozen of us? Just as the 2 sides were arguing, they suddenly turned and looked at the blood river. He could only see a small boat swaying and drifting over. The big bird from the Sky Clan of the Waterwood Heaven was quite knowledgeable. He had seen Han Fei use this kind of thing before. It seemed to be called a boat? Chapter 1342. In the region of Shuemu Heaven, including the creatures on the Cloud Sea Divine Tree, no one had any concept of a ship, let alone the Blood Sea Divine Wood City and the Baibei Royal City. To most cultivators, they had never even heard of a ship. Most of the time, they would occasionally see the existence of a ship in the boundless mysterious realm of the vast sea. However, a ship would either be made of special materials or stored in a special place. Otherwise, it would be corroded after being soaked in water for a long time and nothing would be left. When the big bird saw the ship, it sent a voice transmission, "Follow me." The creatures that could come to the island were at least elites. Who would be willing to wait for death? The big bird and the worm were not stupid. Of course, the 3 of them would not challenge more than a dozen enemies. If they were really that stupid, these people would not have been sent to this island to fight for resources. Swoosh! The big bird suddenly grabbed 2 worms with its claws and flapped its wings. A strong wind blew as it flew toward the ship. Everyone, including Prawn Yue and the others, felt that the ship was very strange. Even though they were elites, they did not recognize it. However, the bird knew what a ship was, so it naturally thought that it was safe. That was why it flew toward it. Where are you going? Come down. When the people from the Blood Sea Divine Wood City and the Baibei Royal City saw that the 3 people from Shuemu Heaven actually dared to fly toward the ship, they thought that the bird had discovered something. How could they give way now? Immediately, 2 people from the Blood Sea Divine Wood City and the Baibei Royal City flew up at the same time. At the same time, he also flew towards the ship. Although the 2 parties did not know what a ship was, seeing that the 3 people from Shuemu Heaven were flying toward it, it meant that it was safe. Su Yi from the Baibei Royal City, who had just entered the 10th place on the prodigy list, also flew toward the ship. Perhaps he wanted to show off in front of Prawn Yue and the others and gain their recognition, or perhaps he was too proud to enter the prodigy list. As for Prawn Yue, he only threw his spear. The remaining 4 people from the Blood Sea Divine Wood City used their talismans. Flame serpents appeared in the air, along with countless saber images that slashed towards the big bird and the others. However, even the giant bird itself did not expect that the moment it grabbed the 2 bugs and flew into the river of blood chi, its wings instantly felt as if they were filled with lead. After flying for less than 1,000 feet, its body began to rapidly descend. Bzzz. The 2 insects that were caught immediately flapped their wings, relieving the pressure on the giant bird. This was the benefit of being a water and wood heavenly spirit. They all had the ability to fly. With the 3 of them flying at the same time, it was much easier. However, this drop was almost irreversible. The 3 of them could only feel the weight on their bodies getting heavier and heavier. The big bird roared, "Burn your blood essence and spiritual energy. Fly over." Poof. At that moment, 3 balls of light, burning with chi and blood, flapped their wings frantically and flew toward the small boat thousands of meters away. However, the people who were chasing after the giant bird were different. The problem was, they had no wings. The moment they flew out, someone had already noticed this problem. A person from the White Shell Kingdom had only flown 1,000 feet when he found that his body was sinking uncontrollably. He immediately wanted to turn around and turn back. However, with a clang, he actually crashed into an invisible barrier. Shrimp Yue and Umbrella 7 were dumbfounded. There was actually a barrier here? At this time, Shrimp Yue and Umbrella 7 had already noticed that their attacks had fallen in midair and couldn't hit their opponents at all. Obviously, they had miscalculated. There was indeed a problem with this Bloodchi river. The person who wanted to come back grabbed onto the glass-like barrier with all his might, but he still slid straight down. He immediately shouted, "Help me!" Apart from Shrimp Yue and Umbrella 7, another person stretched out a long whip, trying to catch that person. However, as soon as the long whip was caught, the person who helped found that he was being pulled over uncontrollably. Shrimp Yue and Umbrella 7 retreated at the same time and pulled together. With a bang, the long whip broke, and the person stopped moving forward. The person who pulled the long whip couldn't fly in the direction of the boat, nor could he go ashore. He almost dragged another person into the water with him. He stepped on the invisible barrier and wanted to go back to chase the boat. Unfortunately, it was too late. But, as the first person to fall into the Bloodchi River, everyone's eyes, including the perception of the giant bird at the front, fell on him. However, the moment he crashed into the Bloodchi River, he seemed to be fine. The person suddenly breathed a sigh of relief and shouted, "There's an invisible gravitational force here. I can't fly for long. I'll swim through the water." "Oh no, my leg." Halfway through his sentence, the person's expression suddenly changed and he began to struggle wildly. Umbrella 7 shouted, "What's wrong with your leg?" The person was horrified. As he tried to swim back with his hands, he shouted, "I can't feel my leg at all." However, at this moment, no one was talking to him. This was because everyone saw that the flesh on the person's hands were melting, and the white bones were already visible. Using the strength of his hands, he made part of his body float out of the Bloodchi River. However, this scene was even more horrifying. They saw that the flesh below his chest had all melted, leaving only the white bones. Shrimp Yue's expression was solemn. "There's no hope." Umbrella 7 and the other person had ugly expressions, especially the person who had helped just now. He was covered in cold sweat. What the hell was this place? He had only soaked in the Bloodchi River for a while, and his flesh was gone? This was too horrifying. The giant bird and the two insects in front of them instantly panicked. Suyi was also panicking. What the hell was this? Was the Bloodchi River so horrifying? Among the two blood demons, a large number of curses appeared on the body of one of them. The space around him blurred, and he was sent flying 1,000 meters forward. At this moment, the giant bird was the first to rush onto the boat. He suddenly flapped his wings, and hundreds of long feathers shot out like sharp arrows. One of the insects was about to crash into the Bloodchi River. Fortunately, a large feather shot at his feet. He stepped on the feather, jumped, and finally flew onto the boat. The other insect was slightly better. Even with his own strength, he could rush onto the boat. The moment the two insects came up, the giant bird shouted, "Explode!" Bang bang bang. Blood splashed across the sky, and the huge thrust made the boat start to move away at high speed. The few people who had some hope were dumbfounded at this moment. Su Yi hollered, "Don't even think about leaving." The other two blood demons, one of whom was not strong enough, screamed, "Sister Wolf, save me." However, the blood demon in front of her who could cross the void didn't care about her at all. It was a matter of life and death. Who could you blame for not being strong enough? You could only blame yourself for not being strong enough. The one called Sister Wolf looked at Su Yi and said, "The one from the White Shell Kingdom, you and I will work together to fight the three of them. Otherwise, none of us can do it." Hearing that, Su Yi immediately agreed. As long as he wasn't an idiot, he would agree at this moment. Bang bang. The wave of blood created by the giant bird was broken, and one of the insects buzzed. That scared me to death. That blood demon fell down too. The other insect buzzed. "What are you looking at? Don't you see that those two are already chasing after us?" The two insects bickered. "Poke them down too." "Heaven-seeking horn, I'll block it. I'll block your lungs." The giant bird flapped its wings, and with a whoosh, it set off a gust of wind. Hundreds of large feathers flew directly toward the blood demon that suddenly escaped. Bang bang bang. Swish. They were all risking their lives. Who didn't have some tricks up their sleeves? The blood demon wanted to block it with the rune armor. In the end, she underestimated the strength of the insect. The horn covered 100 feet in the air, and all its strength was concentrated in this horn. How could she block it so easily? With a bang, the woman was also directly knocked into the long river of blood chi. Su Yi, who was also rushing toward the giant bird, was startled. Those who could come to the island were all prodigies. He had just forced his way up. After all, the ichthyosaur king had killed the 8th to 12th places. It was finally Su Ye's turn. In fact, Su Yi was still a distance away from the true 10th place on the prodigy roll. The ichthyosaur king had the close distance technique. The ichthyosaur king would only need a few steps to snatch the boat. But what about him? A large horn struck horizontally, and several hundred flying feathers swept over as well. To Shui Mutian and the others, they were always willing to sacrifice themselves as long as they could get rid of him. Su Yi really wasn't confident that he could fight 3 at once. However, if he couldn't get on the boat, he would still die. Su Yi had no choice but to fight. However, just as he was about to use his whip to break through the horn and use it to force his way through the flying feather formation, he saw another ship in front of him. Su Ye's face lit up with joy. But then he felt terrible. That boat was more than 2,000 meters away from him. But he was less than 6 meters away from the blood river. He couldn't fly over. With a thought, Su Yi tossed a set of battle armor into the river of blood chi. He tapped his foot on the ground and leaped with all his might, shouting, "Explode!" Boom! The giant bird and the insect didn't have time to attack Su Yi. They could only shout, "Guard the boat." Su Yi used this chance to cross the river and landed on another boat in the blink of an eye. Prawn Yue, Umbrella Chi, and the others watched the blood river quietly. Prawn Yue looked at Su Yi, who was controlling the boat in the distance, and said indifferently, "Don't panic. Since there's a second one, there will be a third, a fourth." On the other side, the remaining blood demons were also discussing. They made it clear that they wouldn't move until the boat arrived. The first one, asking for votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 1343. While these people were thinking about how to cross the river of blood and chi, Han Fei had just opened his eyes from cultivation. Little Black and Little White had successfully advanced. Sure enough, as expected, these two little fellows had both advanced to level 65. At this moment, they were swimming around happily. The sense of alienation between Little Black and Little White was gone. Previously, when Little White swallowed the blue sea smoothie, Little Black avoided it as soon as it came out. After all, Little White was too cold at that time, and Little Black didn't dare to approach it. Now, after swallowing this fire dragon pearl, plus the part of the alien fire that he had swallowed before, Little Black was barely able to resist the extreme coldness on Little White. However, even so, although the two little fish began to play again, Little Black still deviated a little and didn't dare to be too close to Little White. It could be seen that the power that Little Black ate was not enough. Han Fei couldn't help but think, "Son, don't panic. Wait for me to find some more treasures. When the time comes, I'll get you a 10,000-year-old big red trunk and you can eat it as much as you want." While Han Fei was teasing Little Black and Little White, he suddenly felt the ground shake. It seemed that in a place not far away, there was a battle breaking out, and the impact of some power triggered the earth veins. Because of the violent vibration, Han Fei could feel that this power was not far away from him. Han Fei was shocked. He didn't come for the fire dragon pearl. His real goal was the dragon origin chi. He hadn't even seen it yet. In this case, he couldn't let others rob him of it. Han Fei immediately said, "Little White, feel the source of the vibration." Because the vibration of the explosion was too close, Little White turned his head and looked at a corner of the cave. "Dad, over there, go down." Han Fei praised, "Hey, my daughter is really awesome." Han Fei waved his hand, and the infinity water appeared, turned into a blade top, and began to drill on the scale-like rock wall. Clank, clank, clank. Even with the infinity water, It took Han Fei more than 10 minutes to drill a hole in this rock wall. It was like a drilling machine, rapidly drilling through the ground. After about the time it took for half an incense stick to burn, Han Fei felt more and more relaxed. In the end, he actually encountered a tunnel that had already been dug. Someone dug a tunnel? Wait, it wasn't just dug out. These marks seem to have existed for countless years. The old turtle said, "The blood energy ahead is very heavy." Han Fei sniffed and said, "Yes. Let's go take a look." Because the road ahead was unimpeded, Han Fei ran fast. In a few dozen breaths, they arrived at an underground port. Yes, the reason why he was sure that this was a port was that there was a small river crossing here. There were 9 boats by the river. These boats were not very big. They were about twice the size of his wind god boat. Looking at the material, it seemed to be made of ordinary wood. However, Han Fei certainly knew that this ship was extraordinary. How many years had this place been isolated from the rest of the world? Just by looking at the red river water and the thick smell of blood on the surface of the river, you could say, could a boat that could sail on this strange river be ordinary? Han Fei pondered for a moment, reached out, pulled out a shark, and threw it to the shore casually. The shark's body, half in the water, half on the shore. Then, a horrifying scene appeared. Half of the shark's body began to melt, and the flesh and blood melted in the blink of an eye. Han Fei casually pulled out most of the fish bones. The old turtle said in surprise, "A blood pool? Such a large blood pool must be haunted by evil things." Han Fei bared his teeth. "No way. Are you sure it's an evil thing? Will the dragon essence be in this land of evil things?" The old turtle said, "Well, I don't know much about the dragon essence. However, as far as I know, there are many reasons for the formation of a blood pool. The most common situation is that a great war has taken place here and a strong master has died. The strong master's vitality is not extinguished and his soul is dying. In the end, he wants to be resurrected and devours other creatures with his own flesh and blood. In fact, this kind of person is quite stupid. He even believes this kind of nonsense." Han Fei twitched the corner of his mouth and said, He even believes rumors. He's really stupid." "What else?" The old turtle said, "And some people are in a half-dead state and use this method to absorb the vitality of foreign objects to nourish themselves in order to revive in the future. However, few people can really revive themselves. At least, I haven't seen many in my long life." The old turtle paused. "There is another kind, which is that someone is raising corpses. They are raising corpses with the vitality of the dead masters. However, no one knows how many years this place has been empty. Even if they are raising corpses, they may have left long ago." Han Fei's heart did a flip. What if they haven't left? The old turtle was silent for a moment. Then they should be very powerful. If they can raise corpses to this day, I'm afraid the things they raise will be extremely terrifying. Han Fei secretly pinched his fingers, but he didn't expect anything. The old turtle said, "What the hell are you pinching? The heavenly secrets here are all chaotic, which means that anything can happen. No matter how you pinch it, it's useless." Han Fei pondered for a moment and decided to try. If he guessed right, the dragon essence would definitely be extraordinary. If he didn't dare to fight for it, someone would definitely fight for it. If someone fought for it, someone would definitely fight for it. In that case, why didn't he fight for it? He was walking on the path of invincibility. Besides, in terms of speed, there shouldn't be any creature that could match him. Thinking so, Han Fei immediately walked to the ferry. Looking at the boats, Han Fei grinned. He jumped onto a boat, stretched out his hand, and the other boats disappeared on the long river of blood. "I'll take it, I'll take it, I'll take it." The old turtle was speechless. "What are you doing? Are you afraid that someone will come to compete with you?" Han Fei smiled. "Everything is possible. I've already walked the path. I can't open a path for others for free. Besides, what if the boats break down halfway? I have to keep a few for myself, right? If I walk on someone else's path and leave them with no way to go, won't all the opportunities be in my hands?" The old turtle was speechless. He thought to himself, "I've never seen such a shameless person. He took away all the boats by himself. He's not leaving opportunities for others. The old turtle said, "Then you'd better hurry up and go. The vibration just now seems to have erupted from this blood pool. This at least means that someone has been here and has already gone in." Han Fei nodded slightly. "That makes sense. Since I have to explore this place, I must get the opportunities." Han Fei jumped onto the boat, pushed his palm with one hand, and the blood quickly drifted into the pool. "On the way," Han Fei said, "Old Yuan, what do you think is under this blood pool?" The old turtle said, "A blood pool is a blood pool. Generally, there is nothing under the blood pool. Basically, everything that can be corroded has been corroded. Of course, some things that can't be corroded will stay below. However, no one can get them. Relatively speaking, generally no one can get them. Take this blood pool as an example. Even if your physique is amazing, you will die if you go down. There is no second possibility." "So corrosive?" The old turtle said disdainfully, "What's so high about it? This blood pool is not terrible. I've heard of a blood pool purgatory, which is a place where people can be crowned emperors. Legend has it that even a venerable emperor can be corroded." The corner of Han Fei's mouth twitched. "Have you seen it?" The old turtle nodded. "I've heard of it." "Then you haven't seen it." The old turtle couldn't help but be furious. "Nonsense. If I had seen it, would I still be here chatting with you? I would have been corroded." Han Fei looked at the river and couldn't help but sigh. In other words, there may be a lot of good things hidden under this blood pool. It's just that no one can get them. The old turtle didn't comment on this point. Han Fei took out his fishing hook and pondered for a moment. "I'll just make another fishing line if I throw it away. With my current strength, I can hunt all creatures below the venerable level." Swish! When the hook was put down, Han Fei pulled it back in less than 2 seconds, only to find that the hook was broken. Prepared for the corrosion of the fishing line, Han Fei was not discouraged at all. He stretched out his hand, and spiritual energy gathered into a net. Han Fei threw the net of spiritual energy, but before he could pull it up, he immediately felt that he had lost contact with the spiritual energy. It turned out that this blood pool could even corrode spiritual energy. Tisk, interesting. The old turtle rolled his eyes. "Don't try. What do you think the blood pool is? Is it a fish pond?" Han Fei shrugged. "I'm just trying. What if I succeed?" Han Fei took the boat and drifted along the river. After only an hour, he saw a white mist. When he saw the mist, Han Fei immediately felt that something was wrong. Usually, when a mist appeared in such a weird place, it meant that something bad was going to happen. Fuse. Without the slightest hesitation, with Han Fei's current strength and the growth of Little Black and Little White, there would be no side effects if he just fused them. Besides, after the fusion, as long as he didn't fight, Han Fei could still maintain it for a long time. Using the yin-yang divine eyes, the moment Han Fei entered the mist, his face suddenly changed. In the mist, there was an aura that he was familiar with. "Dragon might?" the old turtle asked, but Han Fei ignored him. "Dragon might? Is the Azure Dragon still alive? Wait, who said there would be no pressure after the dragon died?" Han Fei realized that in the ideal palace, just a dragon's soul made his body almost unable to move. In this mist, although there was dragon might, it was far from enough to make his body unable to move. Although his strength was different from that of the past. However, in the face of the pressure of such a strong master, the so-called law enforcers and explorers probably didn't have much difference. The reason why the pressure was not enough might be because there was no dragon soul here, let alone a living dragon. Thinking of this, Han Fei immediately felt a lot more relieved. Bam! Just at the moment when Han Fei felt relieved, he heard the sound of fighting. Han Fei sensed that there were explosive ripples coming. Han Fei murmured, "More than 300 kilometers? I can go and have a look." Fei. Asking for votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 1344. When Han Fei came to the place where the battle broke out just now, he found that an insect had turned into a human form and was fighting with dozens of blood pythons with a strange weapon like a vajra in its hand. When he saw those blood pythons, Han Fei was stunned. Were they transformed by the blood in the blood pool? Half of their bodies were in the blood pool, and the other half were outside the blood pool. They were about 20 meters long. Why were so many of them here? Obviously, the insect was having a hard time killing them. When it saw Han Fei, it exclaimed, "Han Fei! Come on, help me." Han Fei clenched his fists and punched out a series of golden fist marks. With a point of the infinity water, the 10,000 knives in one swept out and killed these blood pythons in an instant. Han Fei couldn't help asking, "Why are you alone? Where are the others?" The insect hummed and sat on the boat. "We've split up. When we came in, there were 3 of us, and we found that this long river of blood and chi actually had many tributaries, which flowed to different places. It happened that we could see other boats on this long river of blood and chi, so we proposed to split up and find the way. In this way, we would have a better chance." Han Fei frowned. "Many tributaries?" Han Fei was stunned. "Why didn't I see any tributaries?" However, Han Fei didn't panic and quickly asked, "What about these big pythons? Are there many blood pythons at the bottom of this blood pool?" The insect nodded quickly. "Yes, there are many. I'm afraid of snakes, but what I'm afraid of comes, and such a big one. I'm so scared." Han Fei was about to say, "Maybe you're just unlucky." However, suddenly, Han Fei realized that something was wrong. What did he fear? Han Fei couldn't help but take a deep look at the insect and suddenly said, "Not good, another snake is coming." The insect hummed, picked up its weapon, and stood on the side of the boat. But. Han Fei said hurriedly, "Look carefully. Don't you see it?" The insect shivered slightly, but the next moment, it saw a big dark red shadow passing by at the bottom of the water. Hula! The blood broke apart, and a huge head stretched out. The blood python roared, but there was no smell in its mouth, only blood spewing out. Han Fei's pupils constricted slightly. Is there something wrong with this place? In fact, when Han Fei shouted that there were snakes in the pool, there were no snakes in the pool at all. It was only because the worm was staring at the blood pool that the blood python emerged from it. At the moment when the blood python emerged, no information appeared in Han Fei's eyes. In this way, Han Fei was certain of one thing: the creatures in the blood pool were created by the fear in people's hearts. This insect was afraid of snakes, so when it was alone on the boat, it would worry if there were any living creatures in the pond. In other words, snakes. Therefore, all of this actually stemmed from his fear. Han Fei was not in a hurry to help kill the blood python. He just let the insect and the blood python fight. The Vajra scepter-like weapon in the insect's hand shone brightly. In the void, the insect horn was also colliding. Bang! 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 The blood python's defense was extraordinary. It was able to completely block the insect's all-out attack. The old turtle was amazed. So that's how it is. It wasn't that the insect wasn't powerful, it was just that the blood python was his own idea. Therefore, the true strength of the blood python was completely determined by the insect itself. If it thinks it can't beat it, it can't beat it. If it thinks it can beat it, it can beat it. Han Fei nodded slightly. That's why I feel that this place is very strange. It even has such a weird technique. Han Fei immediately thought of the sun-moon shells flying in front of him. However, they never appeared. Humph, not reliable. Han Fei wondered if a large amount of spiritual spring and spiritual fruits could emerge from this blood pool. However, this idea might be too far-fetched, so there was no response. The insect was still fighting. Seeing that Han Fei was motionless, it immediately became anxious. Han Fei, this big snake is extremely fierce. Help me. With a thought from Han Fei, the infinity water rolled up and the bloody snake collapsed. The insect was taken aback and immediately exclaimed, "Wow! Han Fei, has your strength already reached such a level?" Han Fei couldn't help rolling his eyes. Damn it! This blood python is a figment of your imagination. In fact, it's not particularly powerful. You think it's powerful, so it's powerful. I think it's vulnerable, so it's vulnerable and can be destroyed easily. The insect froze for a moment, as if its brain hadn't figured it out yet. After a long pause, it said, "I thought of it?" Han Fei shrugged. Why don't you try to think of another one? The insect shook its head like a rattle and hummed. I don't like snakes. There are no big snakes in this blood-chi river. They're all fake and illusory. In fact, there's nothing in them. The insect muttered to itself for a long time before it managed to calm itself down. Han Fei finally asked, Okay, who are you? How many people came with you? This insect was not an idiot. Since it was a top heavenly talent of the insect clan, it naturally had a way to control its thoughts when it realized the problem here. The insect said, I am Insect Lulu. I came with Chong Xiaochong and Phoenix Hedachi. The three of us found this place, but we were chased by more than a dozen people from the Baibei Royal City and the Blood Sea Divine Wood City. We had no choice but to enter this Blood-chi river. Later, when we floated on this river, we found that the Blood-chi river was sandwiched by mountains and there were many tributaries. Because no one was chasing us, we scattered to explore. Is that so? Han Fei couldn't help but have mixed feelings. He was not surprised that two silly insects and a bird escaped from so many people. They were all top heavenly talents, and nothing was impossible. But this insect said there were many paths here. Then the question was, why didn't I encounter any mountains when I came here? Why didn't I find any roads? Han Fei immediately said, Follow me now. With a thought, Han Fei used little white sensitivity to danger to track treasures. After a slight pause, he began to fly in a certain direction in the mist. There was no telling if he had been instilled with thoughts by Insect Lulu, but after only about 10 minutes, Han Fei encountered a mountain. Within the range of visibility in the mist, Han Fei found 3 tributaries. Insect Lu buzzed, Look, I'm not lying to you. There are many roads. When he saw this road, Han Fei immediately shouted, Shut up and close your eyes. I'll control the boat. Han Fei suspected that this road was an illusion. So, he simply closed his eyes and sailed with Little White's perception. Bam! After sailing for less than half an hour, nothing happened. It seemed to be very safe on this Blood-chi river. But at this moment, Han Fei suddenly opened his eyes and stepped onto the bow of the boat. Insect Lulu opened its eyes and immediately appeared next to Han Fei. Bug looked at the blood pool and saw a black mass of unknown things swimming past. He immediately felt a chill run down his spine. Insect Lulu said, I didn't think of it. My mind is clear now. Han Fei nodded. I know. It's not an illusion this time. It seems that there are really creatures in this blood pool. Giggle. Then he heard a faint cracking sound coming from the hull of the ship. Han Fei and Insect Lulu turned their heads, only to see that many palm-sized, soft things similar to abalones had climbed on the side of the boat. In Han Fei's eyes, information emerged. Name blood toad. Introduction, a kind of plankton that feeds on poison and blood. High temperature and poison can't kill them. Their bodies can resist tens of thousands of degrees of heat, and their poison sacs are even effective on venerable realm creatures. Once the blood toad sticks to the body, it will turn into a pool of blood and become highly toxic. It will integrate into the body of the absorbed person and won't leave until the absorbed person loses all its energy. Level 63, quality rare, contains spiritual energy greater than 7,943 points. Effect, inedible, collectible, blood poison. Remarks, they are a group of creatures. The louder the noise, the easier it is to attract their attention. Han Fei didn't know what to do when he saw those creatures. Insect Lulu stretched out a big hook-like hand as if trying to hook these blood toads to death. Han Fei shouted, Don't let them touch your body. You can only attack them from a distance. Insect Lulu was taken aback and immediately withdrew his hand. He opened his mouth and roared, Clatter! A patch of bloody toads exploded from the shockwave. However, the blood toads in the water were surging. More and more blood toads popped up on the surface of the river. Han Fei secretly cursed, This idiot, you don't even know what they are and you're already using this kind of ranged attack. The range of the sound attack was extremely wide. Or you can just use infrasound waves. You only need one shock wave to directly shatter these blood toads. But look, you just shouted it out? I'm afraid the surrounding blood toads didn't want to come here, but they were attracted by you. Han Fei shouted, Stop shouting. Are you an idiot? With a thought, Han Fei launched the million knife art. A large number of blood toads were cut with one knife. However, the water around Han Fei and insect Lulu had completely surged. Bam! He saw a bulging water bag explode, and the blood toad burst out like a fountain. Fuck! Even insect Lulu, who had long been used to the insect sea tactic, was a little panicked when he saw this movement. Han Fei grabbed insect Liolio's big horn and with a swish, appeared a kilometer away. The two boats behind him were directly lost. At the moment Han Fei left the boat, the two boats were pushed up. A large number of blood toads crawled all over the hull, filling the boat. Han Fei stood proudly in the air. With the closed distance technique, he covered a kilometer in one step and quickly jumped out of this space. Insect Lulu froze for a moment and then shouted, "Not good, our boat is gone." Han Fei took 17 or 18 steps in a row, then waved his hand, and a new boat reappeared on the long river of blood chi. As soon as the two of them landed on the boat, Han Fei immediately scolded, "Don't use sound wave attacks. Shut up. You bugs are the best at blabbering all day long." Roar! Soon after the two of them landed on the boat, they heard a faint sound coming from a distance. Han Fei frowned. That seemed to be the sound of a dragon. Chapter 1345. Han Fei had been longing for it. He kept thinking about the dragon origin chi and thought to himself, "I can't let it be snatched away by others." Therefore, after hearing the dragon roar, Han Fei hurriedly started the ship without any hesitation. He wasn't worried about the lack of boats at all. After all, there were 9 more in Forge the Universe. Han Fei pushed his palms, and the surface of the river of blood and chi exploded. Like a hovercraft, the river was pushed forward in the opposite direction. Chong Lulu watched from the side, feeling a little speechless. He thought to himself, "My sound wave is a little loud, but no matter how I look at it, it's not as loud as yours." The dragon roar was not close. Han Fei felt that it was at least 1,000 kilometers away. At this time, the two of them hadn't left the waters of the bloody toads. Han Fei's movement had indeed alarmed the bloody toads. Although they weren't fast, neither was Han Fei. Bloody toads gathered along the way. Soon, Han Fei and Chong Lulu saw waves of blood surging behind them. Chong Lulu buzzed loudly, "They're here, they're here." "Don't panic." He was in a state of shock. So what if he disturbed them? We haven't caught up yet, have we? The boat on the river of blood chi was not a fishing boat after all. Therefore its speed was not fast. Even though Han Fei kept slapping the river, in less than half an hour, the bloody toads in the front and the back had gathered. At this time, the two of them had only run about 500 miles. At the moment when the fishing boat under his feet was swallowed by the blood toad, Han Fei grabbed Buliuliu again and stepped on the air, covering a kilometer with each step. Chong Lulu only felt that people like Han Fei were really powerful. Even in such a dangerous place, he could still be so unyielding and rash. Besides, wasn't Han Fei using the closed distance technique? It was said that this was the law enforcement ability of the Fish Dragon King in the Baibei Royal City, but he didn't expect that Han Fei could also use it. Chong Liolio's thoughts were simple. He thought to himself, "Sure enough, our Shuemu Heaven's Pride is more powerful. What White Shell Royal City? What Blood Sea Divine Wood City?" It was all rubbish. Han Fei and Chong Lulu were still controlling the boat and rushing forward. Not only Han Fei and the others were attracted, but other people were also attracted. Thousands of kilometers away, Zhang Xiaoyan's hands were trembling as he stood on a piece of land. In front of him was a spirit fruit that looked like a blood jade. Even before his reincarnation, he didn't recognize this thing. Now, he was even more dumbfounded. After picking the spiritual fruit, Zhang Xiaotian looked back at the river of blood and qi. Someone must have discovered this place and was on their way. Unfortunately, this place was too strange. Had it not been for the dragon might riddle barrier which had delayed him for too long, Zhang Xiaolan felt that he would have long found the correct path. It should be said that he was the fastest one. Although Han Fei came in directly from the entrance was definitely not easy to walk. If there were no accidents, Han Fei would encounter some treasures, but it would take time to collect them. After all, Zhang Xiaotian had collected quite a lot of things along the way, which had taken up quite a lot of time. But it seemed that the most important thing was still ahead. As a prodigy, Zhang Xiaotian didn't have any sense of crisis. Even if he had to fight Han Fei head-on, he wouldn't back down. This time, who got more treasures, him or Han Fei? Zhang Xiaotian wasn't sure. However, it was obvious that he was faster than Han Fei in terms of speed. As for the other heavenly talents, Zhang Xiaotian didn't care at all. In his eyes, except for Han Fei, no one in the three forces could fight. At this moment, Zhang Xiaotian just looked back and didn't plan to ambush them. Time was so precious that it was not worth it for him to ambush a few people and give up the possibility of getting the opportunity first. Zhang Xiaotian stepped into an ancient teleportation formation that appeared to be in ruins. The moment he entered the teleportation array, he set up a self-destruction array. Yes, he wasn't going to leave this path to others. Since he had used this teleportation array, he would destroy it. If Han Fei discovered it, who would be the winner? There was no way to tell. Just after Zhang Xiaotian left, in less than 20 seconds, a woman in a red gauze appeared on this land with a swish. Nobody's here? The blood demon looked around and found that this so-called land was no more than 1,000 meters long. It wasn't the end of the river at all. Bam, bam, bam. Just as the woman was about to leave, rumbling sounds could be heard coming from the river of blood chi. The woman's face changed greatly. Who's so crazy? There were living beings in the river of blood chi. Once he was targeted by that thing, he would be done for. After being shouted at like this, the woman directly jumped onto her own ship. She secretly pushed the hull of the ship forward and continued to search for the path. When Han Fei and Chong Lulu arrived, Chong Lulu shouted, "Han Fei, there's land and mud over there." Han Fei sniffed and frowned. Zhang Xiaotian had just stopped here, and another blood demon seemed to have stopped here too. Looking at the blood demons that were chasing him, Han Fei didn't go ashore but chose to pass by. When he passed by the land, Han Fei scanned it with his senses, only to be surprised. There were traces of teleportation arrays? The old turtle said, "You seem to be too slow." Han Fei shook his head. "Don't panic. I'm not the only one who came in." In front of them, Little Black and Little White were delayed by swallowing the Dragon Balls, giving them a slight advantage. However, don't panic. They're obviously not far ahead of me. I just need to catch up with them. Han Fei kept moving forward. After a while, he encountered some branches of the river of blood of different sizes that were cut off by the mountains. With Little White's help, Han Fei didn't stop at all but continued moving forward along the river of blood. Somewhere, he encountered a dome of a mountain, and the two of them followed the river of blood and passed under the dome. However, after entering this tributary, Han Fei found that the dome above his head seemed to be getting shorter and shorter. He couldn't see the top just now, but now there was a dome 100 meters high, and the mountains on both sides of the river were slightly narrower. "This seems to be the right way," the old turtle said telepathically. At this time, the blood demons behind him caught up again. Perhaps the entire river of blood chi was their territory. Han Fei stomped on the ground, and with a buzzing sound, 7 or 8 spirit gathering arrays were imprinted on the stone walls on both sides. Han Fei suddenly took out his fishing hook and cast it dozens of kilometers away. Swish! The spiritual energy generated by the spirit gathering arrays could indeed mislead the blood demons. After being hit by the blood demons several times, the spirit gathering arrays dimmed and all collapsed. At this time, Han Fei pulled the boat away with the help of the fishing line on the top of the distant mountain. When flying in the air, Han Fei and Little White saw that there was only a long river of blood left below. The spirit gathering arrays had all collapsed, and the blood demons would probably catch up slowly. However, in terms of speed, they were much slower than Han Fei now. After all, Han Fei was flying like a swing, and he could travel dozens of kilometers at a time. Therefore, the blood demons were not a threat, and he wouldn't be killed by a group of blood demons in the law enforcer realm. After traveling for more than 200 kilometers, Han Fei put one hand behind his back and cast the fishing hook from time to time, anchored it on the stone walls on the left and right banks, and swung forward. This method was quite labor-saving, and Little White was dumbfounded. Little White thought that this was the correct way to sail a boat. If he could only drift on the river, how slow would it be? Suddenly, Han Fei saw that on the top of the mountain in the distance, there seemed to be a boulder hanging down. After taking a closer look, Han Fei breathed a sigh of relief. It turned out that there were some traces of murals engraved on the boulder. Little White asked, "What's that?" Han Fei took a closer look. Those patterns were quite exquisite. Directly above the boulder, there was a monster with a human head and a snake body. It looked like a snake spirit, but it was a man, not a beautiful female snake. Beside the snake spirit, there were standing cranes that raised their heads and chirped, and swans that bent down and flew. That was all there were. The only creepy thing was that the eyes of the snake spirit seemed to be watching the people coming and going in the long river of blood. Han Fei frowned. Why are the snake spirit and a flock of auspicious birds drawn together? This kind of murals had no beginning or end, so it was really hard to guess. About half an hour later, Han Fei felt that this long river of blood should be coming to an end, because there was already the aura of vegetation on the shore. Sure enough, only 100 minutes later, Han Fei found a huge stone gate in the distance. Under the stone gate, from the shore to the gate, it turned out to be a wide road. In the middle of the road, there was a person walking at this moment. Han Fei took a closer look. Who else could it be if not Zhang Xiaoyan? Little White shouted, "It's Zhang Xiaoyan, the strongest expert in the Baibei royal city." Han Fei said, "Shut up. I know." Zhang Xiaoyan also realized that Han Fei and the others were coming, but he didn't even look back. It seemed that the people who came were not his enemies at all. Little White was about to jump ashore, but was pulled back by Han Fei, who shouted in a low voice, "This road is not easy to walk on." Han Fei looked at the road that was only 1 kilometer long and 100 meters wide. On both sides of the road, there was a row of vegetation and thorns. Because they looked so neat, Han Fei realized that the demonic plants on both sides should be a kind of killing restriction. Besides, Han Fei felt a strong pressure here, which could be seen from Chong Liuliu's slightly trembling legs. Although Little White hadn't realized it yet, how could Han Fei not sense the dragon power here? Han Fei immediately turned his eyes to the T-shaped stone gate that was hundreds of meters high. On the stone gate, it was still the same painting he saw on the boulder just now. However, the painting on this gate was more complete. Han Fei glanced at it and found that this painting was divided into 3 parts. One part was T-shaped. The horizontal part was 100 meters wide and more than 50 meters high. This part of the painting was above the sky. Beside the snake spirit, there were standing cranes that raised their heads and chirping, and swans that bent down and flew. They were auspicious birds that belonged to the sky. On the left side of the snake spirit was a sun, and in the sun appeared a creature that Han Fei was familiar with, which turned out to be a 3-legged golden crow. Of course, he hadn't seen it before, but he had at least heard of it. On the right side of the snake spirit was the March moon. There was a fish shadow in the moon. Han Fei didn't know what it was. The second part was the part 100 meters below the T-shape, which should be the middle part of the painting. It was about 100 meters wide and more than 200 meters high. Han Fei could still understand the first half of it. That person seemed to be a very honorable expert in the 9th heaven. It was very likely that he was the so-called venerable sovereign. Then, Han Fei didn't know what the following part was. This part was obviously about the myriad clans in the human world. On the land, there were all kinds of creatures, but not many of them appeared. Among them, there were humans, beasts, and some strange creatures offering sacrifices. Above the sky, there were 3 temples. Han Fei couldn't help but ask, "Old Turtle, do you know what those 3 temples are?" The old turtle was silent for a long time. The legendary 3 divine temples. Han Fei was stunned. 3 divine temples? Which 3 divine temples? The old turtle pondered and said, "Don't ask me this question again. That's a place that even I am not qualified to ask. Few people know where they are. I just know that these 3 divine temples are very powerful. In addition to these 3 divine temples, there are some special forces that are not shown on this map. But once it comes to the temples, no matter how small the forces are, they are behemoths for you. even if you have become a king? The old turtle's voice was quite heavy. He didn't seem to want to discuss this issue. This was the first time that Han Fei found that the old turtle avoided talking about a problem so much. Han Fei didn't ask much. Obviously, these 3 divine temples were still far away from him. After all, even the old turtle didn't want to mention them. He had never even heard of them. Han Fei continued to read. The last part of this T-shaped map was the sea. In the sea, there were no cities, but there were many behemoths. In the map, a variety of marine creatures were depicted, from sharks to seaweed, to octopuses, shells, and so on. Among them, there was a row of relatively illusory figures. Among them, Han Fei recognized the mermaids. Their tails were very distinctive and beautiful. At the end, in the deep sea, there seemed to be a huge shadow. His scalp went numb. Was this the real world? Even kings were not a big deal? A single picture from the 9 heavens to the 3 godly halls, and then to the ocean. The so-called immortal palaces and royal cities were not even mentioned. Han Fei even suspected that the history depicted in this map was far before the Age of Doom. If there were temples, it might be the so-called Age of Gods. Han Fei frowned slightly. Maybe when I enter the immortal palace one day, I will have a chance to learn more about this obscure history. Chapter 1346. While Han Fei was in a daze, Chong Lulu looked at him and didn't dare to disturb him. After a long time, when Han Fei came back to himself, he asked, "How about it? Do you want to walk this road?" Han Fei thought for a moment. "Do you want to walk in the front or the back?" Chong Lulu immediately said, "I'm very loyal. Of course, we'll walk together." Han Fei was speechless. Loyal? Shouldn't you give way to me? Of course, Han Fei didn't care about this. He asked this question to say that this road was not easy to walk on. If he wanted to walk in the front, there might be some danger. However, the brain capacity of the Zerg might not be enough. Especially when it came to these twists and turns of thinking. Unless they had already passed the tribulation or reached the venerable realm. Han Fei looked back. Of course they couldn't wait. Although this road seemed to be only a kilometer long, Zhang Xiaotian had only walked more than 400 meters, not even 500 meters. Since this Zhang Xiaotian was a reincarnation, he should have the means to continue forward. Just like Bai Suzhen, she was the reincarnation of the water fairy. How talented was she? Even when he just entered the demon-subduing tower, he hadn't divided his soul yet. Even when he fought with her, there were always wins and losses. This Zhang Xiaotian was also a reincarnation of a strong master. He was really not weak to have made it this far. After all, he had already passed the 4 Nine King tribulations, and the 9 bloody spears were really not weak. Han Fei frowned. With a thought, he grabbed an arrow from the void and shot it directly at Zhang Xiaotian. However, as soon as the arrow entered the top of the road, a golden stream of light flashed, and Han Fei felt that a huge force was reversed to him. Bam, bam, bam. Han Fei took 7 or 8 steps back in a row before he stopped, with a trace of blood dripping from his hand. Chong Lulu hurriedly said, "You can't attack. Even I can see that. In this case, how could he leave his back to you? There must be some rules on this road. Otherwise, he would never dare to do this." Han Fei nodded. "So, I was just testing him. The power of that arrow just now was not strong." Han Fei took a breath and said, "Okay, then come with me. However, if you feel that you can't go on, don't force yourself. In such a treacherous place, the more you force yourself, the less beneficial it will be." Chong Lulu immediately said, "Of course not. Our insectoid race has always been straightforward. If we can snatch resources, we will snatch them no matter what. If we can't snatch resources, even if they are placed in front of us, we won't snatch them." Han Fei was slightly stunned. Really? Did the Zergs know their limits so well? Why does he seem a little unreliable? Han Fei stepped onto the road without hesitation. As soon as his foot landed on the ground, he felt a terrifying pressure pressing down on his head. This feeling reminded Han Fei of the pressure he felt when he encountered the dragon soul in the Ideal Palace. Chong Lulu, who was next door, immediately fell to the ground with a bang the moment he entered. From his human form, he was pressed into a two-horned Hercules beetle, lying on the ground like a turtle shell. Han Fei took a deep breath. Although this terrifying pressure was not weak, it was not enough to make him unable to move. This place was very much like a test. Perhaps the mysterious man he met on the grassland didn't know that there was such a place on the island. Han Fei couldn't help but turn his head and glance at Chong Lulu. "How about it? Can you still hold on?" Chong Liu's voice was trembling. "I feel that I am going to die. My insect life is about to collapse. What kind of power is this? It's terrifying. My divine soul is about to be crushed." Han Fei was helpless. "If you can't go forward, don't come up. To be honest, if you are like this, I'm afraid this opportunity has nothing to do with you." However, Chong Lulu replied tremblingly, "That's not possible. This kind of power is too terrifying. If I can withstand this pressure and continue to move forward, it will be of great benefit to my cultivation. Moreover, this opportunity might be given separately. It would depend on how far each person could go. It depends on how far each person can go. I am a heavenly talent of the insect race, and I will never admit defeat." When Han Fei heard this, he was almost amused by Chong Lulu. "You're already trembling like this. Why can't you admit defeat?" Han Fei thought of something. According to Chong Lulu, although he had just tried not to fight outside, could he still fight on the road? Han Fei thought of something again, grabbed a dozen array maps of the Great Plate Turtle Array, and threw them to Chong Lulu. "Take them. This is a defensive array. Whenever you encounter danger, uncover one of them. Take your time. I'll go first." Chong Lulu happily took the array map. However, he soon realized that something was amiss. Under this kind of pressure, you still want to go first? Why don't you go to heaven? However, as soon as Han Fei finished speaking, he strode out. Yes, he strode out. Even in front of the dragon's soul, Han Fei could still run away. At this moment, the dragon's soul didn't come out. Why would Han Fei be afraid? Chong Lulu looked at Han Fei, who was quickly pulling away from him, and was speechless. "I'm also a heavenly talent of the insect race. Even if I can't compare to Han Fei, I can't be that much worse." Stimulated by Han Fei, Chong Lulu immediately propped up his claws, held his big horns, narrowed his eyes, and rushed forward crazily. Rushing all the way, Chong Lulu felt that he was being shocked every second. Every step forward, he felt that his claws were softening. He felt that he had rushed down very, very far. When he opened his eyes, Han Fei was even further away from him. Looking back, Chong Lulu was speechless. It turned out that after running for a long time, he didn't even run 50 meters. And Han Fei had already gone down 200 meters. Chong Lulu let out a long breath. "It's terrible." Chong Lulu trembled all over and stopped moving forward, and Han Fei was not much better. After walking 200 meters, Han Fei felt that something was watching him. This feeling of being watched immediately reminded Han Fei of the feeling when he first met the Dragon Soul. This made Han Fei subconsciously use the invincible will. Sure enough, as soon as the invincible will was activated, a layer of golden light condensed on his body surface, and Han Fei immediately felt the pressure was greatly reduced. Then he continued to move forward and walked quickly. Zhang Xiaotian didn't need to look back at all. He had 3 hearts and 9 brains. Therefore, he could see Han Fei completely. Seeing that Han Fei could walk so fast despite his physical discomfort, he couldn't help but be a little surprised. The invincible path? Zhang Xiaotian's face was ugly and his eyes were full of surprise. Although they had fought before, he didn't find that Han Fei had embarked on the invincible path. No wonder there was a special weird power in Han Fei's power when we fought before. Zhang Xiaotian immediately made up his mind. His body suddenly began to change. His feet turned into octopus tentacles, and he held 2 weird spears in his hands and supported them on the ground. The 2 of them walked one after the other, but Han Fei was obviously faster. After walking 300 meters, Han Fei took a break, looked at Zhang Xiaotian's back, and shouted with a smile, "Hey! Slow down. Don't fall." Zhang Xiaotian snorted coldly. "Catch up with me first." The poor guy tried hard for a long time and only moved 80 meters away. He hadn't even covered 1/10 of the kilometer distance. At this moment, someone else arrived behind him. With a chirp, a big bird flapped its wings crazily to control the boat. At the same time, feathers flew all over the sky, as if it was fighting someone. On the same boat as the big bird, an insect phantom was flying in the sky and colliding with a blood demon. Behind them, the 4 blood demons and Prawn Yoe's trio were all alive. However, the few of them only took 3 boats in total. The reason was obvious from the rising water in the distance. The blood demons were surging, probably because the boats had been consumed. At this moment, Phoenix Head 7 shouted, "Chong Xiaochong, it's Chong Lulu and Han Fei. Let's go ashore." Chong Xiaochong hummed, "I'm so tired. These people are so annoying." Chong Xiaochong shouted again, "Chong Lulu, we're here." Phoenix Head 7 said, "Something's wrong. They must have encountered some difficulties. Look, the 3 of them are in different positions and moving forward slowly." Chong Xiaochong was slightly relieved. It seemed that it didn't make much difference whether they came early or late. Not far away, Shrimp Yue and Umbrella 7 looked at each other. Shrimp Yue frowned. It's not convenient to fight in the Blood River. But what's going on that road? Why is it so difficult to walk 1,000 meters? Umbrella 7 said, "Look, Han Fei is catching up quickly, and Shaon has slowed down." Another person said, "Can we sneak attack from behind?" Shrimp Yue sneered. "If you don't want to die, you can try. If it's really possible, do you think Han Fei and that insect will let go of this opportunity?" That person was slightly frightened. "Then it seems that we all have to go on that road." On the other side, a blood demon said, "This road may be a kind of test. Also, it seems that they can't attack each other. Get ashore as soon as possible and don't fight with the bird and the insect." At this moment, Han Fei had barely reached 400 meters. However, there was only a thin layer of invincible will left on him. He looked back and found that everyone had come. However, there was nothing he could do now. Suddenly, Han Fei noticed that there was a power slowly drilling into Zhang Xiaoyan's body. Although it was small, it was there. The power was like a wisp of smoke, curling up gently. Is that dragon origin chi? Han Fei's expression suddenly changed. Zhang Xiaotian had crossed 500 meters and even walked more than 50 meters. So, he could absorb the dragon origin chi after 500 meters? Damn it, are you forcing me? What? Tiger King! There was a deafening roar. As soon as Limelight 7 and Chong Xiaochong rushed into this road, they saw Han Fei roaring at the sky. Then, his body began to change, and many strange fur colors appeared. A colorful tiger was formed just like that. As the saying went, dragons and tigers fought fiercely. Han Fei's pupils suddenly turned vertical. With the power of a king, he roared, and the surface of his body shone with golden light. Han Fei growled, "Today, I will flatten your road." Chapter 1347. At this moment, Han Fei seemed to have sensed the dragon origin chi. It was just that he had arrived a little too late, allowing Zhang Xiaotian to gain the upper hand. If he were to continue hiding it, wouldn't Zhang Xiaotian be the one to snatch away all of the opportunities? Han Fei's eyes narrowed, and his body glowed with golden light. Han Fei swung his body and leaped out like a tiger. He felt the pressure from all directions, but with a thought, he raised his head and roared fiercely. "Oh!" Behind him, Chong Lulu and Chong Xiaochong were all dumbfounded. Even Shrimp Yue found it hard to believe. What the hell was Han Fei? Was he really a human being? The Phoenix-headed 7 murmured, "He's a beast." Is Han Fei a beast? Chong Xiaochong said, "It doesn't matter what race he is. Hurry up and charge forward. This pressure is too terrifying. It must be a great opportunity." Han Fei strode forward like a tiger, and it only took him 10 seconds to move forward 100 meters. Feeling the horror from his soul, Han Fei even roared, "I am an almighty king. How can I be suppressed by your mere coercion? Break it?" Zhang Xiaotian had never seen such a domineering person. Seeing the ferocious beast that Han Fei turned into, his body trembled and his hair bristled, but he still moved forward. It only took a few seconds for Han Fei to reach him. Han Fei glanced at Zhang Shan, feeling the strange power that was drilling into his body, and couldn't help but sneer. "I'm going to take this opportunity." Zhang Xiaotian curled his lips. "It's not the end yet. I don't know what the result will be. You can take action now and let me teach you a lesson." Han Fei ignored Zhang Xiaotian. "Do you think I'm stupid? Take action now? I'm bound to be restricted by the rules. The advantage that I've worked so hard to get here may be gone now." Thinking of this, Han Fei roared and opened his mouth. He used the devouring technique to devour the strange energy from the void. Hoo! When the surging dragon origin chi drilled into his body, the dragon origin chi wandered in his body, partly fusing with his flesh and blood, partly fusing with his bones, and partly making his mind clear. Han Fei couldn't help but feel refreshed. The dragon origin chi could actually enhance the growth of soul power? But there were clearly no ownerless souls. It was a pity that the mouthful he had swallowed was too little. At this moment he was only a few meters ahead of Zhang Xiaotian. It was not yet time for him to be proud. Glaring Vajra. Fuse. Attach. Devil transformation. Han Fei's eyes changed color, a pair of eyes grew on his shoulders, and his body bulged. Behind him, a golden giant appeared out of thin air. At this moment, Han Fei had nothing to hide. Actually, even if these trump cards were to be displayed for others to see, they would not be able to do so. Except for the invincible will, it was really hard to distinguish the others. Han Fei felt that the soreness of his flesh and blood was greatly relieved. At this moment, he roughly understood what dragon essence chi was. In fact, it was a special kind of energy. Although he did not know what the difference was between it and the primal chaos aura, however, this kind of energy could cleanse the body, improve the physique, and stabilize the soul. After going through the cleansing and baptism of the dragon yuan chi, the most fundamental benefit was the increase in strength. However, this was not enough. If this was the only benefit, then the strong master in the grave shouldn't have emphasized it to him. Therefore, either this was not the real dragon origin chi, or the amount of dragon origin chi was not enough. At present, it seemed that both of these situations were possible. After all, he was now at the door of a door. This door hadn't been opened yet, and the road in front of it was not for ordinary people to walk. Could it be that the real dragon origin chi was inside the door? It was hard to say. Han Fei quickly surpassed Zhang Xiaotian. In the end, just as he was about to charge forward and reach the end in one go, the scene in front of him suddenly changed. As if the world had just been created, Han Fei found that his surroundings were blocked by heavy fog. Looking forward, in the white fog, in the nine heavens' starry sky, there was a figure appearing. When he saw the figure, with a bang, Han Fei directly fell to the ground. The terrifying pressure even exceeded that of the dragon origin chi just now. Everyone, including Zhang Xiaotian, was dumbfounded. What's going on? Zhang Xiaotian suddenly realized that there should be a special power 600 meters away. Otherwise, with Han Fei's strong state just now, he would definitely go all the way. However, Han Fei's situation was not over yet. Cracks appeared on Han Fei's body one after another. In an instant, golden blood surged out. Before, Zhang Xiaotian felt that Han Fei was not really much stronger than him, and it was just that Han Fei had been through the tribulation longer. But now, when he saw the golden blood flowing out, he was shocked. Zhang Xiaotian couldn't help but murmur, "Beyond the scope of human bloodline?" Zhang Xiaotian was shocked. He was naturally different from those ordinary heavenly talents who had not seen much. He was old and experienced. Being able to reincarnate was not something that ordinary people could achieve. But at this moment, he was still shocked. Even in his previous lives, it was the first time that Zhang Xiaotian had seen someone transcend the limits of the species when he was only an explorer. Immediately, Zhang Xiaotian narrowed his eyes and stopped moving forward. At least, what Han Fei was experiencing now must be horrifying. He had to think about it. At the front, Han Fei, the Tiger King, was pressed to the ground. He tried his best to stand up, but it was still not enough. The phantom above the skies seemed to be staring at him. He couldn't even straighten his body with just a gaze. The old turtle was also shocked. Not good, this is not dragon power, this is emperor power. What did you see? Why is there emperor power? Han Fei let out a muffled roar from his throat. How the hell do I know? This bastard, he's looking at me. Hush! The old turtle was shocked. What are you cursing? Do you want to die? How dare you curse an emperor? You don't know how you died, do you? Han Fei grunted. What do you know? He's just a phantom, like the phantom reflected by the door. He's not a real person. The old turtle roared. You can't curse if he's not a real person. The perception of a venerable emperor is beyond your imagination. Even if he's 10 miles away from you, he may be able to perceive you. Maybe as long as you say his name, he will know that someone is thinking about him. Han Fei gritted his teeth. I don't know his name. No, I have to get up. I'm walking on the path of invincibility. Why am I lying on the ground? Han Fei stood up vigorously. In the end, when he was halfway up, he heard a cracking sound. His front claw broke. His bones were fractured. In the next second, he lay down again. Gulp. Everyone was dumbfounded by Han Fei's miserable look. What kind of terrifying pressure was this? Even a freak like Han Fei could be suppressed to such a state? Everyone looked at him again. Zhang Xiaotian was no longer moving. He was standing where he was and began to absorb the power that escaped from the void. Although he didn't seem to be absorbing much, he had been absorbing it all the time. Holy light technique. The healing holy light descended, and black and white flashed in Han Fei's eyes. He suddenly remembered one thing, the Taoist heart, that the old turtle said. The old turtle said that a person's Taoist heart was so firm that he wouldn't feel any physical pain. To put it bluntly, he didn't care about himself. Han Fei didn't think he could reach that level for the time being. However, what if he forcibly erased this pain? Gut. Activate. Gut. The terrifying holy light was descending. In an instant, the golden blood flowed backward on Han Fei's body, his wounds healed, and his bones recovered. Bam! Under everyone's astonished gaze, Han Fei suddenly stood up, raised his tiger head, and roared at the phantom. Han Fei once again gave the phantom 100 years of his lifespan. The moment he got up, he rushed on the road. Every time Han Fei took a step, the ground would shake violently. However, the moment Han Fei got up from the ground, the surrounding white mist dissipated, and the figure at the end of the white mist finally disappeared. In the eyes of others, Han Fei's figure began to fade as he ran. Then Han Fei's men disappeared. Zhang Xiaoyan's face changed greatly. Han Fei made it? Han Fei knows the apocalyptic divine technique. Han Fei has the humanoid king bloodline? Zhang Xiaoyan once knew that a long time ago, the king of man crossed the east. That was his great Tao. Han Fei could do it too? Could it be that the sovereign personage was still alive? Is there an inheritance from another generation? Seeing that he was only 30 meters away from him, Zhang Xiaotian hesitated. He had fought Han Fei before and knew how strong Han Fei's physique was. This was a guy who walked the path of invincibility and had a lot of luck on him. In the end, he even used the apocalypse divine art, and only then did he successfully cross this path. Could he do it? Zhang Xiaotian took a deep breath and tried hard for a long time before he finally reached the spot where Han Fei had fallen. He did not move forward but instead began to absorb this strange energy. Zhang Xiaotian narrowed his eyes. Someone like Han Fei is blessed with great fortune. It's the White Armor Emperor's job to think about how to deal with him. I'm still growing up. There's no need for me to fight to the death with Han Fei. Well then, Han Fei roared and rushed to the gate. However, as he rushed, the scene in front of him changed, and he came to a red land. On this land, there was a big bone, which was 30,000 meters long. With the big bone as the boundary, there were a total of 95 branches of the river of blood and qi. Hiss! Seeing this scene, Han Fei gasped. This is a dragon bone? Chapter 1348. This was the first time Han Fei had seen such a shocking scene in his life. This feeling was just like when he saw a dragon boat for the first time, and his heart was full of shock. When he first saw the dragon boat, Han Fei thought, how could there be such a big boat in this world? Now, Han Fei had the same feeling. How could there be such a huge creature in this world? Previously, Han Fei had some imagination about the dragons in myths and legends, and he thought he might encounter them in the future. However, even the dragons in his imagination were not so huge. Although Han Fei had seen the dragon soul in the ideal palace, he only saw a big head at that time. But now, all he could see were dragon bones. The bones were crystal clear like jade, and there were even faint red threads on them. The faint red threads on these dragon bones were still trembling slightly. It was as if many red threads were supporting this enormous body. Directly in front of Han Fei, there was a dragon head, with dragon teeth and dragon horns on the head, just like in the legends. The horns were like deer, the head was like a camel, the eyes were like a rabbit, the neck was like a snake, the abdomen was like a snake, the scales were like a fish, the claws were like an eagle, the palms were like a tiger, and the ears were like a cow. Han Fei was still marveling at the magic of these dragon bones, when he suddenly thought, this shouldn't be an azure dragon, right? After all, the thing he got earlier was a fire dragon pearl. But what about an azure dragon? It was also known as the azure dragon of the East, although he didn't know if this was the correct name in this world. No matter how he looked at it, it didn't look like it was playing with fire. At this moment, Han Fei looked at the dragon bones that were overflowing with red threads and terrifying power, and slowly recovered from the previous shock. Gurgle, a faint red halo suddenly began to emerge from those red threads. From the outside, the dragon skeleton was covered in red threads that looked like blood vessels. However, Han Fei and the old turtle almost found something wrong at the same time. These red threads were all from the tributaries of the 95 blood rivers. And these threads were not blood at all, but the dragon origin energy that Han Fei had just swallowed. However, if the dragon origin energy outside the door was in the form of gossamer gas, then these threads were now like veins in the void, intertwining with each other. But now, they were like veins in the void, intertwining with each other. In terms of quantity, it far surpassed the dragon essence chi in front of the giant door. The old turtle said, this should be the so-called dragon essence energy, there's no doubt about it. But what I don't understand is that this dragon shouldn't be on par with venerable sovereigns. How did he die behind this door? Han Fei frowned. Are you sure we are behind the door? The old turtle thought for a moment and said, oh, I can't be sure, but it could be in another space. The dragon origin chi is gathering, and it has just been gathered. Han Fei saw that the dragon origin chi was gathering into a cocoon at the center of the dragon bone's eyebrows. It was clear that there was such a commotion when he came in. Han Fei asked suspiciously, Old Yuan, does it look like an array? The old turtle pondered for a long time. It doesn't look like a formation, but it seems like some kind of power is recovering. Fuck! Han Fei was dumbfounded. Revive? He's been dead for so long, and only his skeleton is left. How can he still be revived? The old turtle said, of course I can't recover my physical body, but as for my soul, oh, damn. Bam. Without saying a word, Han Fei instantly condensed a fist and punched the big cocoon with the sacrificing punch. While a large amount of dragon origin chi gathered into a mist like a big shield, but it was blown back dozens of meters by the sacrificing punch. Then, it surrounded the power of the sacrificing punch. Bam! The sacrificing punch exploded, but it was tightly wrapped by the massive dragon origin chi and didn't damage the big cocoon at all. Han Fei's face changed drastically. Not good, the human expert in the grave is hostile to the dragon race. If the dragon soul wakes up, how am I supposed to get out of here alive? Old Yuan, attack and kill him. The blood mist spread, trying to wrap and protect the big red cocoon where the dragon origin chi was gathered. The old turtle took action, but red lines spread out. The old turtle's black mist power was poked into a hornet's nest in an instant. He heard the old turtle yell, that won't do. This emperor's current strength is too weak. Unless you have chaotic chi to supplement me, you can't resist this dragon origin chi at all. Han Fei turned into a big ape and stretched out his hand, and the embroidery needle appeared. Monkey King 3000 strikes. Han Fei wanted to break the big red cocoon now. No matter what, he couldn't let anything weird come out of the big cocoon. At this moment, Han Fei attacked with all his strength, and the force of 1,000 waves surged. Puff! Suddenly, there seemed to be a dragon roar shaking in the big red cocoon. Han Fei vomited a mouthful of blood. The embroidery needle in his hand was directly knocked away. Damn it, is it really reviving? The old turtle roared frantically, "Rush in, rush in." Han Fei was helpless. "I'm crazy. That's a dragon. Wouldn't I be courting death if I rushed in?" The old turtle said eagerly, "No. Have you forgotten how you swallowed my power? As long as you attack, it can't deal with you as it doesn't even have a physical body. Or it can't deal with your little calabash." The old turtle continued, "According to what you said, dragons and humans are enemies. How are you going to fight this time?" Hearing the old turtle's words, Han Fei felt that it made sense. Although he didn't know if this big cocoon would really be dangerous, he was really panicking now. However, he was really panicking right now. He felt that if he couldn't get rid of this cocoon, he would probably die this time. This kind of premonition couldn't be said to be deceiving himself. As an explorer, he had even comprehended the Tao. This kind of thing had become a part of his vigilance. Han Fei gritted his teeth. Gemini Divine Technique. 2 clouds of mist suddenly rose. With a thought from Han Fei, the black mist body entered Forge the Universe, and the white mist body stepped to the big cocoon. Seeing that Han Fei took the initiative to come over, the red mist immediately rolled over with countless red threads. Less than half a meter away from the big cocoon, Han Fei seemed to see a shadow swimming inside. Although it was very blurry, it should be in the shape of a snake or a dragon. Seeing this scene, Han Fei's expression became even more solemn. He was here to hunt for treasures, not to deliver a package. When encountering such a prehistoric super strong, the first thing he had to think of was to prevent himself from being possessed by this kind of creature. However, because of the demon purification pot, theoretically, it was impossible for him to be possessed. This was why the old turtle asked him to rush into the dragon origin chi. Han Fei was speechless. What was the strong master of the desolate tomb thinking? Why did he ask him to do such a dangerous thing? This was a genuine dragon race creature. Even if it died, it must be someone that a person like him could deal with? Bam! Han Fei turned back to human form, surrounded by thousands of knives, and held the sacrificing punch. Looking at the dragon origin chi that looked like a riddle, with a bang, Han Fei directly crashed into it. When the surrounding space became sticky, Han Fei drew his sword. Snowmorn burst out with dazzling brilliance, forcibly splitting a gap in the barrier. At this point, Han Fei finally rushed to the side of the dragon origin cocoon. Void lines. In the blink of an eye, all of the void lines were wrapped around the cocoon. Han Fei knew that he would be the one who would be hurt, but he still did it. He needed to activate the demon purification pot. Following the void lines, Han Fei heard one dragon roar after another. Sure enough, Han Fei vomited blood crazily. He felt that blood was gushing out of his eyes, nose, mouth, and his ears were already ringing. At the moment when his soul was injured, the stress mechanism of the demon purification pot should be activated. Otherwise, if his soul was injured or perished, where would the demon purification pot go? This was Han Fei's plan. With his mouth full of golden blood, Han Fei roared, "Suck it!" At that moment, green vines and leaves extended from between Han Fei's eyebrows. Moreover, there were 3 such small vines extending out at once. In Han Fei's sea of consciousness, the old turtle looked at the spinning demon purification pot above his head. Originally, he thought that this was the moment when the demon purification pot was at its weakest, and he should be able to take the opportunity to escape. However, as soon as the old turtle's body moved, the gourd directly pressed down and smashed on his turtle shell. Cough, cough, crack. The old tortoise let out a groan as a crack appeared on his soul armor. This scene scared him so much that he didn't dare to move. The old turtle was pressed down by the demon purification pot and didn't dare to move at all. The dragon energy in the outside world seemed to have gone crazy and began to gather towards Han Fei. It was originally just an independent big cocoon, but now it directly turned into two big cocoons. Ow, 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 Han Fei screamed. That was because countless strands of dragon essence chi were beginning to enter his body. In addition to the small vines devouring, Han Fei also felt that the blood in his whole body was boiling. In short, his flesh, bones, and soul seemed to be burning. The most terrifying thing was that his skin directly turned bright red, looking like a monster. Han Fei was wolfing down the dragon energy with the swallowing technique. In just 10 minutes, he had become more than 3 times fatter. No. I still have to cultivate the indestructible body art. Chilla. This time, it was really burning, and Han Fei's skin was burned to nothing in an instant. The dragon energy rushed directly into his flesh and meridians. The feeling of his bones being rubbed into powder came back at this moment. Hold on. As long as I break through this level of the indestructible body art, the rest is all about the soul. It has nothing to do with the body. While Han Fei was in excruciating pain, the dragon shadow next door was boiling and began to roar incessantly. Han Fei was dizzy and felt that his head was going to explode. His body hurt, his soul hurt, everywhere hurt, and he felt that his body no longer belonged to him. Damn, the apocalyptic divine technique. Han Fei knew that if this went on, he would be shocked to death even if he didn't die of pain. Immediately, he cast the apocalyptic divine technique again. In any case, it would only consume a few years of vitality to relieve the synesthesia. Therefore, in one of the 2 big red cocoons, a beam of white light descended from time to time. In just half an hour, the white light had descended more than 30 times. Half an hour later, with a crack, Han Fei suddenly opened his eyes. He had made a breakthrough. Chapter 1349. Han Fei was already numb to the pain. Like smoking marijuana, every once in a while, Han Fei would cast an apocalyptic divine technique on himself to refresh himself. Relying on the fact that he could absorb the vitality of living creatures, Han Fei didn't panic at all and took this opportunity to cultivate the indestructible body. Before he finished cultivating the indestructible body, Han Fei could no longer suppress his aura. All aspects of his body had been polished extremely solid, and he directly made a breakthrough. It could be seen how much dragon origin chi Han Fei had absorbed this time. However, this was not all. The breakthrough made Han Fei suddenly wake up from a state of confusion. At this moment, the dragon shadow next door was no longer roaring, and Han Fei felt that his lower body had been transformed into a golden body. Even his 2 arms and spine had turned into gold. What was missing were the ribs and the skull. At this moment, it was the ribs that were still in the process of being golden. Han Fei was a little dumbfounded. How could the fucking skull turn into a golden body? While resisting the pain, Han Fei asked, "Old Yuan, will the skull turn into a golden body break my head?" Unfortunately, at this moment, the old turtle was suppressed by the demon purification pot. As long as the demon purification pot didn't leave, it didn't dare to say a word. Han Fei's words were like a stone thrown into the sea. Han Fei thought it was because of the dragon origin chi that old Yuan temporarily lost contact with him. Now, Han Fei felt that the ribs should be almost ready. As for the head, let's wait a little longer. In any case, this dragon origin energy seemed to be endless. He still had to borrow the dragon essence chi to raise his cultivation level first before thinking about anything else. Half an hour later, after more than 20 apocalyptic divine techniques, Han Fei's ribs were tempered, leaving only the skull. Not in a hurry to temper the skull, Han Fei crazily consumed the spiritual spring in Forge the Universe with the infusion of the dragon origin chi. Level 75, 76 level 77, Han Fei was about to break through the barrier of the intermediate explorer in one fell swoop. However, when the terrifying spiritual energy and dragon origin chi in his body rushed out, Han Fei's skull cracked with a crack before the barrier was broken. Puff! A mouthful of blood spurted out, and Han Fei suddenly found that the bone between his eyebrows had cracked. Han Fei? Han Fei had never thought that his bones would be fractured by cultivation. What kind of logic was that? Is it because skull hasn't turned into gold yet? Suddenly, Han Fei thought of something. Could it be because of the Gemini divine technique that he had used? After all, the body of Black Fog was only half of him. This dragon essence chi should not be able to kill him immediately. Whether he hid in Forge the Universe or used the Gemini divine technique, he should have a chance to escape. Han Fei gritted his teeth, and with a thought, the body of white mist appeared too. Buzz, after deactivating the Gemini divine technique, Han Fei's body and soul became one. In an instant, Han Fei's fat body that was about to explode began to shrink like a balloon as if it had a vent. Whew! After 100 seconds, when his body recovered to about 3 times its original size, Han Fei felt that he should be able to make another breakthrough. Bang! Crack! Not good. It's the heavenly awakening divine art. At the moment when a massive amount of energy broke through the threshold, suddenly, the center of Han Fei's eyebrows cracked again. A crack appeared on the top of his skull. Han Fei had a severe headache and didn't feel well. The white beam of light descended, and Han Fei felt as if he had drunk a mouthful of divine wine and came back to life again. At this moment, the old turtle tentatively said, "Don't try any more." Han Fei was surprised. "Old Yuan, you're still here? Tell me first, what's going on?" The old turtle secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He was afraid that Han Fei would kill himself. Otherwise, Han Fei would kill himself before the demon purification pot confiscated him. The old turtle said, "Can you move the gourd away from me first?" Han Fei cast a heavenly awakening divine technique on himself and immersed his soul into his sea of consciousness, only to see that the demon purification pot was pressing on the old turtle's turtle shell. Moreover, it even caused a crack in the turtle shell. Han Fei's eyes narrowed slightly. The demon purification pot hadn't attacked the old turtle for a long time. It didn't make sense that it would attack the old turtle now. The old turtle must have been doing something just now, but he didn't succeed. Han Fei said leisurely, "Old Yuan, we are already so familiar with each other. Let's not beat around the bush. As for what happened, I won't ask any more. However, tell me first, why can't I make a breakthrough now?" The old turtle pondered for a moment and seemed to accept Han Fei's proposal. Seeing that Han Fei came to ask in person and the demon purification pot didn't respond, it said, "The skull is the most difficult place to turn into a golden body. Your strength has increased too much, but the skull is the only place that hasn't become a golden body. The power is extremely unbalanced, so you can't make a breakthrough. Besides, although you haven't become a golden body, you have refined too much this time. A few days ago, your soul was cut in half, which is also an imbalance. Therefore, it is impossible for you to make a breakthrough with a top-level spiritual heritage that has surpassed the mortal heritage. Even if you break the barrier of the intermediate explorer, it will inevitably lead to the instability of your foundation." Hearing this, Han Fei immediately understood. "Oh my God, it turns out to be like this? I thought it was because I used the Gemini divine technique." The old tortoise added, "The dragon essence chi is starting to weaken a little. Find a way to break the big cocoon next to it and see if you can shatter it? Swallow his divine soul?" Han Fei was stunned for a moment. "I didn't even think about it. Is the old turtle asking me to kill a dragon soul? Wait." Han Fei suddenly realized something. This is just a dragon soul in a state of awakening, not a real dragon soul phantom. Why can't I kill it? Didn't the old turtle say that my strength has grown a lot? When the heavenly awakening divine technique descended, Han Fei roared, "Explode!" Because there was no water to nourish it, the power of the explosion of the infinity water was slightly weaker than the last time. However, Han Fei's continuous breakthroughs also made the infinity water grow at the same time. Therefore, its power was not weak. At this time, Han Fei's body had been destroyed to numbness by the indestructible body, and Han Fei didn't care about the pain caused by the explosion of the infinity water. The dragon origin chi was blown up, and the sacrificing punch burst out again, hitting the big cocoon with the dragon shadow next door. Sword drawing technique. Knock on the heavenly gate. Han Fei even used the 100 Beasts soul-suppressing roar. Didn't you roar at me just now? Okay, now I'm going to kill you. Roar again if you can't. If you can't kill me, I'll kill you. Sure enough, at the moment when the 100 Beasts soul-suppressing roar burst out, the dragon shadow in the big cocoon next door fluttered and roared again. This time, Han Fei was still bleeding from his eyes, nose, mouth, but he felt better than before. As soon as the big cocoon was opened, Han Fei jumped in with a swish. When the old turtle proposed to him just now, Han Fei was already ready. First, he would slay the dragon soul, then absorb the dragon energy, then temper his body, and then make a breakthrough. In this way, the water reached the channel, and he went through a perfect process. However, this first step didn't seem so easy to do. As soon as Han Fei jumped into the big cocoon next door, the void lines also buckled up. Suddenly, Han Fei felt that a terrifying soul power was hitting him. Immediately, he shivered and shouted, "Fuse!" Little Fatty was an ancient mutant with a weak divine beast bloodline. It could ignore the spiritual attacks of all creatures within 10 levels of itself. Now, Han Fei was facing the soul attack of the dragon soul shadow. Although Little Fatty wasn't strong enough, its spiritual resistance wasn't weak. Besides, it was hard to break through it. Bam! Under the terrifying impact, the surrounding void collapsed. The power of the soul attack this time was beyond his imagination. A scene that chilled Han Fei's heart appeared. On his shoulder, one of Little Fatty's eyeballs completely exploded. At that moment, Little Fatty said to Han Fei via voice transmission, "Kill him quickly. I can still resist one more blow before I die." Han Fei burst into fury when he heard that. He didn't expect that Little Fatty would be seriously injured in the fusion state and was about to die. Oh! As soon as the second dragon roar came out, Little Fatty's remaining eyeball on Han Fei's shoulder instantly exploded. Han Fei himself was bleeding from the explosion too. But Han Fei didn't care. He shouted with bloodshot eyes, "Calabash, kill it!" The soul-suppressing roar of 100 Beasts was unleashed. However, it wasn't enough. Even if the dragon soul had just been awakened, it wasn't something that Han Fei, an intermediate explorer, could penetrate. At the critical moment, the demon purification pot seemed to understand Han Fei's meaning and unhurriedly cut off a small vine that was absorbing the dragon origin energy. He saw that the small vine had directly latched onto the dragon soul phantom that was 7 or 8 meters long. Burp. The dragon soul seemed to want to continue roaring. However, it was strangled by the small vine and the dragon roar disappeared. Then, the small vine went deep into the dragon shadow. With the help of the small vine, Han Fei temporarily controlled the awakened dragon soul with the void lines. Fuck, explode. Swish. The small vine suddenly shrank, and Han Fei stepped on the soul-driving array under his feet, and dozens of coiled turtle arrays broke through the air. Rumble, outside. The Life Queen and the White Armor Emperor were waiting for the result. Some people had just entered. Now, this mountain range had gathered most of the creatures on this island. Rumble, all of a sudden, the crowd saw mountains collapsing one after another in the mountain range. A terrifying array suddenly appeared, directly covering the entire mountain range. In the array, the long river of blood was still flowing, and the smell of blood soared into the sky. The Life Queen and the White Armor Emperor looked at each other solemnly. "There's a blood pool here." Chapter 1350. The blood pool was supposed to be in an independent space, but because of the death of the dragon soul, the whole mountain collapsed, causing the blood pool to burst out. However, everyone could only see the blood pool. Outside, there was a dense array of blood chi. Unless an expert took action, this place wouldn't have been destroyed. At this moment, the people who were floating on the blood pool didn't feel this way. They only felt that the earth was shaking. Apart from that, there was only the blood toads. But as long as there was a boat, the blood toads weren't a big problem. After all, they weren't Han Fei. They didn't dare to make too much noise and attract all the blood toads in the water. At this moment, the biggest problem was that the gate where Han Fei and Zhang Xiaotian hadn't appeared. It was still hidden somewhere. The White Armor Emperor and the Life Queen didn't look at the people on the blood pool at all, but at Zhang Xiaotian and Han Fei. Thousands of beasts were running away. The intense blood qi here terrified them. However, there was dragon origin qi in some places. Many creatures gathered there and swallowed it crazily. The insect king, Changshui Qin, and Yun Chu seemed to have received the news. They all grabbed a wisp of dragon origin qi. No one had ever seen this kind of power, including the Life Queen and the others. Cough, cough, cough. Covered in blood, Han Fei was lying in a vast expanse of dragon origin qi like a salted fish. His body slowly began to swell again. A white pillar of light descended, and the apocalyptic divine technique fell again. Han Fei estimated that this time, he probably consumed at least another 300 years of vitality to support the cultivation and growth this time. However, Han Fei didn't cultivate the indestructible body at this moment. Instead, he split hundreds of souls out. The dragon soul died, leaving a lot of ownerless souls. Compared with the pure golden body, the growth of the soul power was the most important. Once one's spirit power grew, it would cause one's overall strength to start recovering and even soar. Therefore, compared with the cultivation of the indestructible body, Han Fei wanted to make up for the loss of his soul power more. When the blue soul fire returned to his head, Han Fei clearly felt that the power of his soul was increasing. However, he also discovered that the dragon essence qi outside was continuously gathering and automatically wrapping around him like a large cocoon. In this way, Han Fei's body couldn't bear the force anymore. No. Such surging energy must not be wasted. We have to send some into the fixed sea map. Well then. In the sea quelling painting. Bai Suzhen's family was currently in Earth 9's territory. This family had never seen a land creature before. In the Yao summoning tower, had they ever thought that in this world, there would actually be such a mystical place? Zhang Yao and the snake demon both felt that this was probably the most comfortable days they had lived in all these years. Bai Suzhen didn't feel anything. She had a cold personality. Although she was curious about the small animals in this world, these animals were too weak. She had no interest in them. When the Life Queen entered this place, she already knew where it was. Because she knew that Bai Suzhen was the reincarnation of the Water Fairy, the Life Queen slowly approached the Water Fairy as a hermit expert in the sea quelling painting. For this, the Life Queen threw the punishing saber out of his thatched cottage. The punishing saber ran to accompany the fire seed bitterly. The Life Queen occupied the thatched cottage on the high mountain. At this moment, Bai Suzhen was standing under the peach tree, talking to the thatched cottage. Bai Suzhen asked, "Is the growth rate of the demonic plant clan really so high?" The Life Queen replied, "The demonic plant clan is probably the longest living creature in this world. You are talented, have an ancient species, and have a body of flesh and blood today. In the future, you will definitely be able to cultivate both. Don't lose sight of the other." Just as the Life Queen and the others were talking, Han Fei's voice suddenly appeared in the sea quelling painting. "Tree spirit, punishing saber. Listen, I'm going to send a batch of energy in. Eat hard. Don't slack off. Eat hard. If you can't finish it, clear this world. Senior Zhang Yao Bai Suzhen, you are destined to meet me. It's hard too." The tree spirit and the others quickly responded, "Yes, master." Zhang Yao cupped his hands. "Thank you, Brother Han." The Life Queen was slightly taken aback. "How many batches of energy are you going to send in? Let so many people eat it? Eat as much as you can?" In the thatched cottage, the Life Queen's voice was indifferent. "What about me?" Han Fei was stunned and immediately said, "Of course you can eat as much as you want. What's mine is yours, isn't it?" Han Fei was a little speechless. As long as the Life Queen didn't change her way of addressing him, he couldn't call her his junior sister. Han Fei thought, to forge iron, one has to be strong. I should make a breakthrough as soon as possible, even if it's just becoming a venerable. He was also a big step away from becoming a king. Of course, Han Fei also knew that his growth speed was already terrifying enough. If it was any faster, it would really be a bit abnormal. Swish, swish, the entire sea-quelling painting began to emit terrifying energy. The dragon origin chi circulated in this world as if it were free. At first, it was just a little power wandering in the sea-quelling painting. However, half an hour later, all the plants and ordinary creatures in the sea-quelling painting began to make breakthroughs. Half an hour later, the plants in the sea-quelling painting grew crazily. The tree spirit and the other four stood proudly in the void and began to swallow crazily. Zhang Yao and Bai Suzhen were also surprised. What's going on? Such terrifying energy was thrown in as if it were free. Who on earth was Han Fei? Even the Life Queen was a little stunned. This was not normal natural energy, nor was it chaotic energy. It had nothing to do with chaotic energy. This was a brand new kind of energy. Where did Han Fei get such a huge amount of energy? The Life Queen knew very well what Han Fei was capable of. It must be because Han Fei couldn't eat it himself. Otherwise, he wouldn't have channeled this energy into the sea-quelling painting. Unfortunately, the Life Queen in the sea-quelling painting was just a bit of soul and couldn't absorb much. At this moment, the Life Queen suddenly said, "That's enough. The spiritual energy in the painting is limited. If you want to absorb the energy with the creatures, you also need a lot of spiritual energy and spiritual spring. Now, the spiritual energy here is already very thin. If you put more energy in, all the living beings here will explode and die because of too much energy." Outside, Han Fei was having a good time. He didn't know how much dragon origin chi there was. Anyway, he already felt that the amount of dragon origin chi had decreased a lot compared to the beginning of the first day. The demon purification pot was absorbing, so was the sea-quelling painting, so was his absorption, so it was much slower. Hearing the Life Queen's words, Han Fei glanced at Forge the Universe and found that there was only a little more than 1,000,000 caddies of spiritual spring left. Seeing this, Han Fei's heart suddenly tightened. Am I so poor again? 1,000,000 caddies of spiritual spring was more than 1,000,000,000 points of spiritual energy. However, Han Fei usually got money like water, and he could reach the peak of his life by robbing casually. But now, when he fought with Zhang Xiaotian for the heavenly tribulation just now, he consumed nearly half of the resources. Then, when he swallowed the dragon origin chi, he consumed a lot of spiritual energy to make a breakthrough, which led to the lack of spiritual spring. Han Fei gritted his teeth, and with a thought, he only left 500,000 caddies of spiritual spring for himself and sent the rest into the sea-quelling painting. At this time, the ownerless souls outside hadn't been swallowed yet. At this time, it was not suitable for him to continue to cultivate the indestructible body, let alone make a breakthrough. Han Fei could only try to stuff them into the sea-quelling painting. Swish, swish. When a huge amount of spiritual energy flowed into the sea-quelling painting, the corners of the raw rice queen's mouth twitched slightly, and she thought to herself, "This bastard is really rich and capricious." She said, "Not enough. If I want the creatures here to be the same as the outside world, I'm afraid I'll need 10 times more spiritual energy." Even if they used it sparingly, it would only last them for one day, provided that they couldn't continue to send energy inside. Otherwise, it can only last for half an hour at most. Han Fei was speechless. "Okay, got it." Seeing that the sea-quelling painting couldn't be stuffed, Han Fei thought, how long has it been since Forge the Universe was opened? Since the sea-quelling painting couldn't use up this huge amount of energy for the time being, he could just stuff it into Forge the Universe first. The Fish Dragon King, who had become a Millennium Snapper, was really like a salted fish recently. Han Fei didn't let her out, so she lay on the ground, seeming to be recalling the past. Suddenly, she saw that everything around her went dark and she couldn't see anything. The Fish Dragon King asked, "Han Fei, what are you doing? What are you panicking for? There are some things you can't see. Stay here." The spiritual spring rolled up like a storm, and the purest spiritual energy filled Forge the Universe. Now, it was different from before. In the past, Han Fei used tens of thousands of points of spiritual energy. At most, he used hundreds of thousands of points of spiritual energy. Now, it was hundreds of millions of points of spiritual energy. Therefore, Han Fei directly prepared 100 million points of spiritual energy for this expansion. While the spiritual energy was consumed, the dragon energy was poured into Forge the Universe again. Another half an hour passed, and Han Fei didn't know how many hours had passed. In short, the sea quelling painting had been completely closed, and he couldn't send any more energy in. The demon purification pot was still absorbing, which solved many problems for Han Fei. Forge the Universe expanded to a radius of 5,000 meters. The larger the scope, the more spiritual energy Han Fei consumed. When it expanded to a radius of 5,000 meters, the actual consumption of spiritual energy was 150 million points. Usually, Han Fei wouldn't panic at all. This little bit of spiritual energy was not even enough to deduce a major technique. But not now. Now, Han Fei's spiritual spring was scarce again. Plus all the spiritual fruits and spiritual energy he had, the total amount was only 500 or 600 million points. He needed energy to cultivate the indestructible body and make a breakthrough, so he had to save some. But fortunately, at this moment, the ownerless soul had almost been devoured. Han Fei felt that his soul had been greatly improved. Although it wouldn't return to its previous peak, it had definitely skyrocketed. At this time, Han Fei thought, now, I should continue to cultivate the indestructible body with the help of these gradually diminishing dragon energy. Once I cultivate the indestructible body, I need to use the apocalyptic divine technique. Once I use the apocalyptic divine technique, I have to consume vitality. From the vitality I gave to the old turtle at the beginning to being consumed in a mess, I'm afraid I've lost 700 or 800 years of vitality. Even if all the people on the island were sucked dry, it wouldn't help. After I go out, I have to find a way to kill people and devour their vitality. Alas, what can I do if I can't use up the dragon energy? Chapter 1351. Standing before the peculiar gate, Zhang Xiaotian immediately sensed that the amount of draconic qi in the surroundings had increased. At this moment, the entire road was filled with dragon essence qi. Chong Lulu exclaimed, "What a powerful force!" Inside the gate, Han Fei injected some energy into Forge the Universe. However, how could the space of Forge the Universe be compared to the sea quelling painting? The sea quelling painting spanned tens of thousands of kilometers. Forge the Universe was only 10 kilometers in radius. After a while, Forge the Universe was full of all kinds of spiritual plants, filling up the existing space. Fortunately, the ownerless souls around Han Fei didn't affect his cultivation anymore. So, Han Fei continued to cultivate the indestructible body. This time, Han Fei was even more painful. He really felt that his skull had been crushed into ashes, and he was in so much pain that he wanted to die. However, once Han Fei stopped, a large amount of dragon energy would still drill into his body. If he was careless, he would be blown up by the dragon energy. The old turtle said, "Stick to your belief and try to understand your own path. The pain of the body is nothing to be afraid of." Han Fei gritted his teeth, his eyes red, and thought to himself, if I could understand the true meaning of the belief, I would have done it a long time ago. Who would want to be in so much pain? You old turtle, it's easy for you to say. I don't believe that you easily understood the belief back then. Apocalypse divine technique. Han Fei performed the apocalypse divine technique again. It seemed that every time he performed it, his pain was reduced a little. It was like smoking marijuana. He was almost addicted to it. Han Fei thought to himself, if I can walk on this path, maybe my body won't be in pain anymore. However, when Han Fei thought of this, he suddenly realized something. When the great path of heavenly enlightenment was established, did the Creator have this mentality and let the future generations walk on his path and eventually become his leaks? With that in mind, Han Fei made up his mind not to use the apocalyptic divine technique anymore in the following days. As for how to endure the bone-crushing pain, he might as well burn his essence blood. Although it also consumed vitality, It was much less than the consumption of the heaven-awakening divine art. After all, the apocalypse divine technique consumed vitality. Fusion. In an instant, Han Fei used the fusion technique that had always been of little use. As an inherited secret technique of Little Black and Little White, this fusion technique had never been useful. However, at this moment, with the effect of burning essence blood, Han Fei's strength became stronger and he could resist some pain. Han Fei asked, "Son, can you control Daddy's body?" At this moment, Han Fei suddenly remembered that every time he fused, he would be very crazy and sometimes he couldn't control himself. At that moment, he didn't seem to feel any pain. In his mind, Han Fei didn't forcibly control this body with the power of his soul. Sure enough, Little Black's consciousness immediately filled the fish head's head after the transformation. This feeling was very strange. Han Fei seemed to have become a part of the consciousness of this body. Although he knew that the physical body was in extreme pain at the moment, when he was in a completely mental state, he suddenly found that the pain was greatly relieved. It seemed that his spirit and body had been completely separated. 2 hours. 2 hours. While Han Fei was practicing the indestructible body art, the river of blood and qi in the outside world was already chaotic. Maybe because of the collapse of space, some rules in this small world seemed to be collapsing. The earth was shaking, and there were fiery meteors falling from the sky. The whole world was in a doomsday scene. In the river of blood and qi, the blood water suddenly decreased. The blood aura on the surface of the river and the clumps of mist were also diminishing. On the contrary, the number of blood toads increased. Some heavenly talents who were still on the river suddenly found that there were more boats on this river of blood and qi. These boats seemed to appear out of thin air, and no one knew where they came from. At this moment, most of the heavenly talents had come to the river. In the river of blood energy, these people were like the 8 immortals crossing the sea, each displaying their own abilities. Some people controlled their boats to flee. Some people's boats were surrounded by blood toads. In desperation, they found 2 or 3 boats not far away, so they jumped to them and escaped death. Of course, some people were stained by blood toads. After being poisoned, they could only hold on for about half an hour before their bodies began to rot. In this doomsday scene, the real heavenly talents of the various forces were soon selected. After all, at the juncture of life and death, one's potential would be maximized. The Life Queen and the others were also shocked by what they saw. Even though this island wasn't that big, it was still far beyond their expectations, even though it had been raided several times by several forces. At this moment, life and death were on the line. As the apocalypse descended, in this moment of life and death, the various prodigies used all of their trump cards and trump cards. At this moment, everyone's foundation was revealed to him. Although the outside world was in chaos, in front of the giant gate, crack. This was the 8th time that someone had made a breakthrough on this road. That's right, everyone who came to this door today had basically broken through at least once. Obviously, the frequency of this kind of breakthrough was a little too high, to the point that it was shocking. Although some people had reached the peak of the sea spirit realm or the peak of the law enforcer realm, there was still a gap between them. Today, they still felt that they had made a small breakthrough, which made their foundation more solid. For example, Zhang Xiaotian had just passed the 4-9 King Tribulation. Originally, he should still be consolidating his cultivation. However, at this time, he was devouring the dragon origin qi while consolidating his cultivation. In just a short period of 10 or 12 hours, he felt that his foundation was already very solid. Even so, Zhang Xiaotian didn't look happy at all. His cultivation was stabilized very quickly, but what about Han Fei? Han Fei managed to cross the 600-meter limit, so the benefits he would get would definitely be much more than what he could get. With that thought in mind, Zhang Xiaotian felt as if he was going to war with the heavens. After a long time, Zhang Xiaotian suddenly felt that the amount of dragon origin qi around him began to slowly decline. He couldn't help but be shocked. Is this power going to disappear? Has it been absorbed by Han Fei? Thinking of this, Zhang Shan was even more anxious. The opportunity was right in front of him. Was he going to regret it for the rest of his life just because he didn't dare to take it? He had reincarnated and even had the courage to be reborn, but he didn't even have the courage to break into a secret realm? Zhang Xiaotian reached the limit of 600 meters with a single step. However, as soon as his feet touched the ground, he heard a bang, and his entire body directly fell to the ground. Clatter! Zhang Xiaotian's octopus body was directly pressed out. 4 octopuses, their defense and ability to deflect attacks were extremely strong. However, at this moment, Zhang Xiaotian finally felt the pain that Han Fei had just now. Is this the power that a human can withstand? This was a completely different kind of pressure compared to the pressure from before. Zhang Xiaotian felt that a heavy fog appeared around him, and his eyes subconsciously looked into the depths of the fog. In the end, he saw a figure that looked a bit like a figure from a painting. Just a gaze from the other party was not something that he could bear. At that moment, Zhang Xiaotian was shocked. Even in his previous life, he had never met such a terrifying expert. Behind Zhang Xiaotian, the group of people also saw Zhang Xiaotian's miserable appearance, and then thought of Han Fei's previous extreme pain. They all had a feeling that Zhang Xiaotian was probably still a little worse than Han Fei. Especially Prawn Yue and Umbrella 7, they realized that from now on, there was one person in the Shuemu heaven that they couldn't mess with, and that was Han Fei. They all knew that Zhang Xiaotian had secretly reserved his strength. However, even so, he was still not a match for them. It was already obvious that Han Fei had passed the same short circuit and the same difficulty, but Zhang Xiaotian seemed to be even more miserable than Han Fei. At this moment, Chong Lulu had been wriggling all the way forward and had come to a point of more than 400 meters, close to 500 meters. It turned out that as long as one was willing to persist on this path, they would still gain something. The only huge obstacle was the 600-meter place. Chong Lulu said, "Chong Xiaochong, Limelight 7, hurry up. The further we go, the more power we have. My insect body has greatly improved, and I will definitely be able to pass the tribulation when I go out this time." Chong Xiaochong said, "You animal, why are you climbing so fast? Damn it. This pressure is enough to scare someone to death." Chong Lulu remembered Han Fei's figure and couldn't help but say, "Do you know what is fast? Han Fei has already run away. As a heavenly talent, we can't be timid." Everyone thought that someone had made a breakthrough. However, all of a sudden, everyone raised their heads and saw that a crack had appeared on the giant gate. They didn't know if Zhang Xiaotian was lucky or what. At this moment, the gate cracked. This allowed him to breathe a sigh of relief. Otherwise, he really felt that he would have been crushed to death here. However, at the place where the 95 tributaries of the rivers of blood and energy converged, the 3 small vines between Han Fei's eyebrows were still devouring crazily, and the vine leaves were getting more and more dazzling. However, the dragon origin chi suddenly began to plummet, and the ownerless souls had all been absorbed. Han Fei didn't know to what extent his indestructible body had been cultivated. He only felt that his skull was shining brightly at this moment. The spiritual spring in Forge the Universe, if not counting the spiritual fruits, was less than 200 million points. It could be seen how difficult it was to cultivate the 5th level of the indestructible body. This was just the indestructible body, not part of the soul cultivation of the indestructible overlord body. By then, Han Fei felt that he wouldn't be qualified to cultivate if he didn't have enough spiritual spring. In Han Fei's Sea of Consciousness, because the dragon shadow was completely destroyed, the demon purification pot flew up from the old turtle's body again. This made the old turtle heave a long sigh of relief. "Damn, I'm so scared." The old turtle finally realized that this demon purification pot was very magical. Did he want to run out when it was unprepared? It was unlikely that he would be able to do so. In the future, if there was a chance, he should still build a good relationship with Han Fei. This was the safest strategy. Blub, blub, crack, crack. Han Fei found that the big scarlet cocoon around him was getting thinner and thinner. It seemed that the so-called dragon origin chi was gone after all. Han Fei was even a little shocked. How strong was this dragon when it was alive? He cultivated the indestructible body, swallowed power, repaired his soul, developed Forge the Universe, the demon purification pot absorbed it, and the sea-quelling painting stored it. But he couldn't swallow it completely. As a matter of fact, Han Fei had calculated many times in his heart that all the places that he could absorb energy had been filled. Even his indestructible golden body was about to be completed. The energy of the dragon origin chi just disappeared. Even so, the remaining dragon origin chi didn't completely disappear, and there should be a lot left. However, this big cocoon was no longer enough to bind him, and there wouldn't be infinite energy drilling into his body. Then he looked at his feet, under the dragon's head, and tentacles stretched out from a cloud of blood mist. Who could it be if not Little Fatty? However, at this moment Little Fatty seemed to have changed a little. Did its tentacles turn red? Crack. Suddenly, Han Fei saw the ground crack, and the tributaries of the bloody river began to flow backward. Immediately, Han Fei thought to himself, "Not good, this place is going to collapse." First update. Asking for votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 1352. Han Fei thought that although there wasn't much dragon origin chi left, his indestructible body should be completed soon. As long as he completed the golden bones of the skull, his indestructible body should be completed. But this place was about to collapse. Han Fei glanced at Forge the Universe again, only to find that the spiritual spring inside was almost exhausted. His complete indestructible body seemed to be lacking just a little bit. After hesitating for a while, Han Fei stopped hesitating. Although it was only a little short, he was always stuck at the last step when he cultivated the indestructible body. Every time, he either calcined it with the alien fire, deduced the void fishing art to attract lightning bolts, or passed a tribulation. It seemed that with the dragon origin chi, he almost completed the 5th level of the indestructible body in one go. He still needed an opportunity to complete the last step. Only in this way could he achieve greater mastery. Then, Han Fei took a look at his information again. Han Fei was shocked by what he saw. Owner Han Fei, level greater than 76, Intermediate Explorer, Spiritual Energy 190,000/190,000, Spiritual Powered 25682/25682, Perception Range greater than 3,200 kilometers, Power greater than 602 waves. First Spiritual Heritage, Unknown. Second Spiritual Heritage, Unawakened. First Spiritual Beast, Twin Yin-Yang Spirit Swallowing Fish, Level 65. Second Spiritual Beast, Unawakened. Main Art, Sky Stealing Technique, Level 6 of Void Fishing, Venerable Level, Divine Quality. Han Fei's first attention was naturally his soul power. Previously, his divine soul power was close to 30,000 points. He thought that it would be an extremely long process to make up for his soul power. After all, he swallowed the new consciousness that was born in the water fairy's body, and the total increase in his soul power was only about 6,000 points. But now, it was just a dragon shadow. Besides, a lot of the soul power from its self-explosion dissipated in the void. However, just this dragon shadow alone had increased his spiritual strength by nearly 9,000 points. He had instantly recovered more than half of his spiritual strength. Han Fei firmly believed that if he cultivated for a while and visualized the god-scaring painting, it shouldn't be a problem for him to recover to his previous peak soul power. The increase of 40,000 points of spiritual energy wasn't a big deal. Originally, his spiritual energy reserve had dropped from 180,000 points to 150,000 points. At this moment, it was equivalent to breaking through 2 levels and walking on the path of 3 levels. It was normal for him to replenish his spiritual energy. Even so, Han Fei still felt that it was not enough. After all, a peak intermediate explorer was different from a beginner intermediate explorer. At the level of an explorer, one step at a time was like a whole new world. Han Fei certainly understood this. Although the Beast King art, in a sense, could not be regarded as a secret method, it should be a kind of innate ability of this race. It was already very impressive that he could achieve this effect by forcibly learning it. At least, at this moment, the Beast King art could still provide 3 times the strength. If he broke through the current realm, Han Fei was almost sure that devil change would basically be useless. The power provided by the Beast King art could only be doubled at most. Even the amplification provided by the agility of wind was greatly reduced. It was not because the agility of wind was a secret method, but because Han Fei's strength was growing and his basic speed was also increasing. On the other hand, there was a limit to the speed that the phantom glass wings could provide. Otherwise, it would be ridiculous for a venerable one to be able to increase their speed by several times with the phantom glass wings. Therefore, Han Fei seemed to have improved a lot in all aspects. In fact, if all the power, including secret methods, was taken into account, he was probably not much stronger than when he had just become an intermediate explorer. Of course, the benefits of the improvement of his own strength could not be explained by such simple data. After all, secret methods could not be maintained for a long time, but his own strength could be used at will. Crack, crack, crack. The ground cracked again, and little Earth's fat head stretched out of the red mist. Bam! Part of the gigantic dragon skeleton collapsed. Han Fei broke out of the big cocoon of dragon origin chi and felt that his mental state had never been better. His body was 2 or 3 times fatter, and he lost about 800 years of vitality, but his strength had soared a lot. It was possible that he was a little unsure at the beginning. Everything else was fine. The fat body just couldn't absorb all the energy. With his current strength and growth rate, he would be able to return to his original state in 2 to 3 days if he was fast, or 2 to 3 months if he was slow. Han Fei wanted to store the dragon origin chi, but the dragon origin chi was dissipating. Han Fei had a feeling that this place would collapse before he could store the dragon origin chi. The old turtle also roared, "Let's go! The heavenly secrets here are chaotic and it's extremely difficult to perceive. You have to find the door here." Han Fei said, "Where there is water, there is a way out. From here, a total of 95 blood pools are separated. Why is a tributary missing?" Han Fei clearly remembered that it was 95 before. How did it become 94? The old turtle said, "Well, maybe one of them was swallowed by you." Han Fei didn't believe it. One of them was swallowed by him? Was the blood in the blood pool drinkable? However, Han Fei didn't think too much and just said, "There are so many tributaries. There must be one that can go out." The old turtle said, "It's not good to waste too much time in the blood pool. You know, when you came in it was only a blink of an eye." Glancing at little fatty that had just been reborn, Han Fei recalled it with a thought. Han Fei said, "I have to run. But there's one more thing I have to do." The old turtle asked, "What?" Swish. Han Fei had already flashed out, grabbing and holding the huge dragon bones and shouting crazily, "Collect! Collect! Collect!" The old turtle. The dragon bones were 3,000 meters long, but Forge the Universe was indeed big enough for him to put them in. However, the old turtle was a little speechless. You want treasures, but you don't even want your life? Besides, are these still treasures? After tens of thousands of years of erosion, these dragon bones probably had no blood left. These bones couldn't even be made into ultra-quality divine weapons, not to mention sea-quelling bizarre treasures. However, how could Han Fei's opinion be the same as the old turtle's? The good things in your eyes are at the level of sea-quelling bizarre treasures. The good things in my eyes, as long as they can reach the level of semi-divine weapons, are all fucking good things. In an instant, Han Fei used the close distance technique and his figure flashed quickly between the dragon bones. Dragon heads, dragon claws, dragon ribs, dragon cervical vertebrae, they were all crazily stuffed into Forge the Universe. Although Forge the Universe could fit, it was estimated that there wouldn't be much space left after this dragon was stuffed in. Bam, 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 crack. Even though Han Fei was fast enough, he still couldn't keep up with the speed of the collapse of this place. He had only collected half of the dragon bones, and a large area of the dome had already collapsed. Around him, cracks appeared one after another in the void. The old turtle shouted, "Not good. You're right. This is not behind that door at all. This is an independent small world. Now you've swallowed all the power in the small world. This place is about to be annihilated." Han Fei asked, "What should I do?" There are 94 tributaries. Which one is closer? The old turtle was speechless. In this case, one is to resist the space turbulence and return to the door. Another is, as you said, since the source of the blood pool is here, we can find any tributary and get out. Han Fei was still collecting the dragon bones while looking for a way. He didn't believe that it would be easy to get out of the blood pool tributary. This tributary must be extremely long. If he went out from here, he might as well. Han Fei suddenly stood on a dragon bone, and an idea flashed in his mind. What do 95 tributaries and 94 tributaries mean? 9 and 5, the dragon flies in the sky, and the dragon sees the Lord. What about 9 and 4? Now it's not in the sky, but in the abyss, implying that the dragon is hidden in the abyss. The dragon is hidden in the abyss. Han Fei seemed to remember that this number didn't correspond to this word. But in any case, didn't this give him a reason? The source of this river of blood is actually right below the blood pool? If so, Han Fei stretched out one hand and drew an array with one hand. After dozens of strokes, a teleportation array appeared. The old turtle was puzzled. Where are you going to teleport it? Han Fei smiled. Above my head. Second update. Asking for votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 1353. When he was carving the teleportation array, Han Fei had actually made 2 preparations. If the way out was really as he expected, then he should be able to directly leave this small world and return to that place in front of the door. But if the way out was wrong, or if he fell into the blood pool, he would activate the invincible will and the law enforcement golden body in an instant. Then he would instantly open the void and escape from the void. For others, this might be difficult. However, Han Fei felt that his physique had been strong enough to make his hair stand on end. In a short period of time, it shouldn't be a big problem for him to resist the void turbulence. Han Fei looked at the big cracks and void cracks in all directions. Even many thick dragon bones were entangled in. It was a pity that half of the dragon bone was lost. If he still had some time, he would never allow such an ultra-quality material to be left here to be covered in dust. Swish. Han Fei stepped into the teleportation array, only to feel that the void in front of him was chaotic. In the teleportation space, many cracks appeared in an instant. Just when Han Fei thought he would be involved in the void turbulence, his eyes suddenly lit up. He actually came out. And the place where he came out was not somewhere else, but in front of the gate. The fact that he could appear here only meant one thing, that was, the distance between his small world and here was not very far. Han Fei appeared here just to try to teleport here. At this moment, he was only more than 200 meters away from the giant gate. Gotcha! As soon as Han Fei appeared, he heard a crisp sound like thunder. Looking up, he saw that a crack suddenly appeared on the giant gate in front of him. Wait, Han Fei suddenly discovered that there seemed to be something wrong with the place where the crack appeared. When he took a closer look, it didn't seem to be a crack, but a curved door gap. All of this happened at the moment when Han Fei came out. Behind him, Chong Lulu roared, Han Fei, where did you come from? This place is going to collapse, and the blood river is going to overflow. Han Fei felt that although the pressure of this giant gate was not small, it was much weaker than when he came. He didn't know if it was because of his great improvement in strength, or because there was a crack in the door. Han Fei looked back and saw that Zhang Xiaotian was lying 200 meters away in his original form. Han Fei knew how it felt. It must be the feeling of being crushed to death. However, as cracks began to appear on the giant gate, the pressure emanating from Zhang Xiaotian's body was alleviated. At this time, he could also stand up with difficulty. Behind Zhang Xiaoyan, rubble littered the ground. The roof had collapsed, and boulders were falling from the sky. Chong Lulu and the others were looking at Han Fei nervously, trying to run forward. However, his strength did not allow him to do so. Even if they wanted to run, they couldn't. Behind them, the waters of the blood pool were flowing upwards. Looking at the others, some of them were able to easily return to the ship because they had controlled the ship rather late and had only set foot on this road for a short time. Some people were even watching the show. There were some who did not panic at all. For example, Shrimpy Yue and the others were still devouring the dragon essence chi. Han Fei knew that these people must have put away the boat. Han Fei shouted, "Where are your boats?" Seven said, "We came in a hurry. We confiscated them." Han Fei's face darkened. What the hell is wrong with them? It's really worrying. He didn't know how his junior sister felt at ease letting these guys come over. Han Fei looked at the blood pool that was still more than 200 meters away from them, and then he heard the giant gate crack and continue to crack. The billowing smoke and dust dispersed, and Han Fei seemed to see a ray of light through the gap. Han Fei gritted his teeth and said telepathically, "You three wait a moment. I'll be back soon." Chong Lulu and the others thought to themselves, "What the fuck is going on? Where are you going now?" Zhang Xiaotian and the others who were watching the show were shocked to see that Han Fei was still trying to rush to the end of the road. Sweet. The huge stone gate was indeed opening. Zhang Xiaotian and the others also realized what was going on. However, the gap was only slightly exposed. They could only see white and nothing else. Fuse. Han Fei moved another 100 meters. When he felt that his feet were soft, he activated the fusion state. In his dantian, the Dao seed was activated, and Han Fei thought, "I can see behind the gate." This was a self-deception, his own prophecy. However, this was Han Fei's Dao, a special ability to deceive the heavens and the earth. Therefore, when the yin-yang divine eyes appeared, the white light in Han Fei's eyes gradually dissipated. Han Fei seemed to see a cloud behind the gate. The sky? However, this picture was soon penetrated, and Han Fei seemed to see a huge waterfall falling from the sky. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was the Milky Way. It seemed that birds were swimming in the sky, and human figures were floating. Han Fei looked up, and suddenly saw the stars shining brightly. Someone was facing the sky. As if sensing something, that person turned around to take a look. Puff! Han Fei didn't see his face at all. At the moment when the person looked back, he had forgotten what the other party looked like. He could only vaguely remember a plain gaze. Han Fei stepped back, vomiting blood crazily. At the center of his eyebrows, the demon purification pot trembled, as if it had resisted a huge attack for Han Fei. The old turtle didn't understand and immediately asked, "Did you see something behind the gate?" "That's impossible. Even I couldn't see it. How could you?" Han Fei vomited blood and hurriedly cast the holy light technique on himself. Then he gasped, "I didn't see anything, but I vomited blood." Han Fei thought to himself, "I really didn't see anything. Except for a waterfall, a galaxy, and a vague figure, there was nothing else." However, Han Fei was sure that the person was definitely not dead yet. He even looked back at him. What kind of place was behind this door? What kind of person would have the ability to stand in the middle of a starry sky? Zhang Xiaotian was slightly surprised. Was there another obstacle ahead? He thought that Han Fei couldn't have seen anything from the gap of the giant gate, because it was just a gap. He thought that Han Fei must want to enter the giant gate, but he had to pass another obstacle. And Han Fei failed this hurdle. That was why he was vomiting blood crazily. Crack, crack. At this moment, before the gate was opened, the dome of the mountain above his head seemed to be unable to bear a certain force and was full of cracks. Dum, 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 bam, 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 boom, boom. A lot of boulders were smashing down. In the blood pool, many blood demons were shouting, "Retreat!" Prawn Yue roared, "Shao, let's go!" Umbrella 7 roared, "We'll always have opportunities again." Prawn Yue and Umbrella 7 retreated until they reached the edge of the blood pool, before they took out boats and boarded them. Zhang Xiaonan stared at Han Fei for a moment before rolling on the ground. He retreated to the 600 embark and quickly retreated. Han Fei saw that he indeed had to run. If he didn't run, he would be screwed if the void turbulence appeared here too. Even if the void turbulence didn't appear here, as long as the mountain completely collapsed, the blood pool would cover this place. Even if he took out his boat, would he be able to escape? That was also a problem. However, he didn't panic. Winning in the midst of chaos was his style of doing things. Bam, Han Fei took a step forward and ran to where Chong Lulu was as if he were sprinting. Seeing Han Fei's action, everyone from the Blood Sea Divine Wood City, the White Shell Royal City, and the Shuemu Heaven were all dumbfounded. Are we really on the same path? We're moving forward bit by bit. How can we be like them? He took one big step at a time. In just a few seconds, Han Fei rushed to Chong Lulu and the others, grabbed Chong Liuyo's bighorn with one hand, and kicked Chong Lulu, who was retreating, into the blood pool. And with his other hand, he grabbed the beak and quickly retreated. With a thought from Han Fei, a boat appeared, and the four of them returned to the boat amidst the falling rubble. Chilla. As soon as he got on the boat, the arrays under Han Fei's feet popped up one after another. None of the falling stones or the splashing blood pool could splash on Han Fei's boat. Han Fei said, "Hurry up, push the boat." Hoop. 7 flapped his wings, and Chong Lulu also spread their wings. Han Fei waved a big hand made of spiritual energy, and the four of them worked together to push the boat up. Bam, bam, bam. Unlike others, 7, Chong Lulu were all flapping their wings, which might cause ripples on the surface of the blood pool, but they wouldn't blow up the surface of the blood pool. But Han Fei was different. No matter how big the noise this bastard could cause, the boat sailed as fast as thunder. Chong Lulu shouted, "Han Fei, stop. You'll attract more bloodworms." Yes, Chong Lulu didn't know about bloodworms. He thought it was also a kind of worm. 7 said, "That's a unique creature of the blood pool. It's very scary. Such a fierce action will attract their attention." In the distance, Umbrella 7 of the White Shell Royal City sneered. Han Fei is a bit too stupid. On the blood demon side, some creatures were also speechless, but they said excitedly, "Very good, let Han Fei lead the people of the Shuemu Heaven to their deaths. Let's go." Han Fei sneered and shouted, "Everyone, hand over the sun moon shells you have. If they're worth less than 1,000,000 spiritual springs, we'll fight you to the death." Everyone? Chong Lulu and the others? Han Fei pushed the boat and ran fast. Not only that, he began to blast out countless golden fist marks. Not to hit other people's boats, but the blood river around them. Prawn Yui shouted, "Han Fei, are you crazy? You will attract an army of bloodworms. By then, no one will get any benefit." A blood demon was furious. "Han Fei, do you want to block our way alone?" Han Fei sneered. "Why didn't you leave just now? Are you still waiting to watch the show? Bah, do you think my show is so good? Today, except for the 2 ships that have already slipped away, pay up for the rest." Someone thought of something and said in a low voice, "Take the other tributaries." Han Fei grinned. "Do you think I'm joking with you?" Tutu, small spirit gathering arrays emerged one after another. When hundreds of small arrays emerged, a large spirit gathering array condensed in midair. At this moment, Han Fei finally realized what it felt like when old Jiang stepped on the big array and suppressed the void. He was too pretentious. Spiritual energy was gathering, and dozens of spiritual fruits exploded. For a moment, the blood pool surged, and bloodworms had already emerged. Chong Lulu and Chong Xiaochong shrank their heads. "Oh no, oh no. Han Fei, the bloodworms are coming." Ah Chi tilted his head and looked at Han Fei. His IQ was higher than the 2 worms, and he knew that Han Fei must have something to do this. Han Fei said, "Come on, Han Fei, invite the heavenly talents of the White Shell Royal City and the Blood Sea Divine Wood City to hell." Chapter 1354. All the heavenly talents here were stunned by Han Fei's behavior. "This place is about to collapse. Don't you know how to run? Why are you still in the mood to rob us? If it were an ordinary place, it wouldn't be a big deal if it collapsed. But here, the blood toads were surging like tides below, and the dome above was pressing down like a mountain. Originally, there were many ways to get out. Although these people didn't know that there were as many as 94 ways, they had all come from different ways. If they wanted to leave, it shouldn't be a problem as long as they avoided the crisis of the blood toads. But now Han Fei was standing in front of them. He had attracted the spiritual energy in this place with the spirit gathering array and the spiritual fruits, and the blood toads were coming from all directions. Seeing this, everyone including Zhang Xiaotian felt that their blood was freezing. Did Han Fei want to die? Someone shouted, "Kill him! Two fists can't fight four hands. Today Han Fei is trying to stop us. Let's let him know that he's not the only heavenly talent here." Zhang Xiaotian of the Baibei royal city reached out and grabbed. "Let's have a try." Zhang Xiaotian knew that he couldn't kill Han Fei. However, with so many people working together, he might not be able to kill Han Fei. At the very least, it was not impossible for him to make Han Fei panic and take advantage of the chaos to escape. After all, he was the strongest of these people. Han Fei wouldn't leave himself here in the face of so many people, would he? That was simply unimaginable. As Zhang Xiaotian spoke, in the blink of an eye, the 9 bloody spears appeared again. Prawn Yue and Umbrella Chi attacked at the same time, shattering the void inch by inch. On the other side, the blood demons were chanting spells, and a large number of spells even enveloped the place where Han Fei was. There were also spells that caused the blood to surge and rise upside down. The Phoenix Head 7 shouted, "Han Fei, don't fight him." Looking at the overwhelming attacks coming at them, 7, Chong Lulu, and Chong Xiaochong were all dumbfounded. Even in the outside world, they wouldn't be able to resist such a terrifying attack. Chong Lulu also shouted, "Han Fei, run. It's the same if we go out and rob him." Han Fei sneered. "Are you sure? You can still snatch it if you go out? Chong Lu, let me tell you, if you don't walk through the gates of hell, you won't know what it means to be fearless." After that, Han Fei chuckled with Snowmorn in his hand. "I had an enemy who taught me a very powerful sword technique. Look at the sky-sealing sword tide." This was Sun Mu's trump card. Under normal circumstances, there were many people who could block such a powerful move. However, the blood toad was still surging above the pool of blood. The power of this move was even stronger than his 10,000 returning sabers. Han Fei drew an array with his sword, and the blood behind him surged out like huge waves. Of course, Han Fei didn't expect the sky-sealing sword tide to block so many powerful attacks. Zhang Xiaotian's 9 bloody spears should be enough to break the sky-sealing sword tide easily. However, this technique caused a huge commotion. With such a huge commotion, the blood pool became even more dangerous. Everyone wanted to leave, but there were only so many boats, and there were countless blood toads. No matter which way they chose, they would try their best to leave as long as they could. Boom! A sacrificing punch bombarded and shattered Prawn Yue's and Umbrella Chi's attacks. Of course, the sacrificing punch was mainly used to block the 9 bloody spears. Seeing that the spears were broken, Han Fei said casually, "Now, I've only triggered part of it. There's such a large space here, and there are other ways that haven't been touched. As long as you pay, I promise I won't trouble you." Zhang Xiaotian clearly sensed that Han Fei had become much stronger. Previously, Han Fei's sacrificing punch could only resist the power of 5 spears at most. However, this time, the power of the 6th spear was easily broken through. Just like that, Han Fei clenched his fist and punched again. The long sword in his hand caused the blood sea to move again. Chong Lulu and the others were all dumbfounded. What kind of terrifying power did Han Fei have? How could he shatter so many attacks with his own strength? Under the sky-sealing sword tide, everything was in chaos and the blood pool was everywhere. The sword energy was like a tide, and among them, the blood toads were attacking. The blood toads were a law enforcer. No matter how weak they were still law enforcers. Under the siege of tens of millions of blood toads, how could these people resist? Not only that, Han Fei put away Snowmorn and a big bow appeared in his hand. Swish! Swish! Han Fei drew the bow and shot 5 arrows in one breath. Each arrow was terrifying. Those curses that were going to strangle Han Fei were directly shattered under the bombardment of the arrows. Someone exclaimed, "How is it possible? How can he absorb spiritual energy so fast? Doesn't he need spiritual energy to shoot one arrow after another?" Someone was shocked. "He must have a way to temporarily store spiritual energy." Someone said, Let's escape together. There are many exits here. Can he seal all of them? Swish. Swish. Han Fei shot out a series of arrows without stopping. 1 breath. 2 breaths. 3 breaths. When Zhang Xiaotian realized that Han Fei was stronger and that he was no match for him, he stopped attacking but chose an exit with Prawn Yue and the others. Han Fei didn't bother with them at all. Zhang Xiaotian must have other trump cards. Besides, he couldn't kill them with the War Soul Bao technique. Therefore, Han Fei's arrows were like flying locusts. He only destroyed the enemies, not killed them. Some people could resist his destruction and had ways to deal with the blood toads. However, most people didn't. At this moment, Han Fei didn't stop for more than 10 seconds and shot out a series of arrows. Wherever those people's boats wanted to run, Han Fei's arrows would shoot them, making the waves of blood roll. At this moment, 3 boats of the Blood Sea Divine Wood City were blocked by Han Fei's arrows. There were a total of 6 people on these 3 fishing boats, and none of them escaped. Having no choice, the 3 of them tried their best to deal with Han Fei. One of them bombarded Han Fei's surroundings with curses, trying to make trouble for Han Fei. The other 2 were trying to open a way and rush into a random tributary. However, although it was a good idea, they didn't have the strongest person among them, nor did they use any special trump cards. In fact, even if they could fight as strong as advanced explorers, it wouldn't matter to Han Fei. At this moment, Han Fei's strength was already far beyond that of ordinary advanced explorers. Even if he didn't use any secret techniques, few people below the peak level could defeat him. Han Fei roared, "Pay for your life. 1 Sun Moon shell for each of you. It's not expensive at all. Do you want to consider it?" A blood demon got up angrily, stepped in the air, and shot 3 beams of green light at Han Fei. Han Fei slightly narrowed his eyes. With his current eyesight, he could see through it at a glance. Judging from the sharpness of the 3 nails that could break the soul, they should be intermediate or advanced disposable divine weapons. Han Fei waved his hand and the infinity water was twisted into a piece. Ding ding ding, sounds of collisions were heard, and the long nails were sent flying. The blood demon's red veil was lifted, and he squeaked, and thousands of ink-like curses surged out of his body. The incantations were like restraining runes. Han Fei felt that the void around him was sealed, and poisonous things were drifting. The heavenly talent of the Blood Sea Divine Wood City is just SOSO. Han Fei roared and punched out with the sacrificing punch. With a puff, the woman vomited blood and retreated. The spell seal was also pierced by Han Fei with 1 blow. Han Fei waved his big hand, and the poisonous cloud seemed to be caught in his hand. Han Fei was cut 7 or 8 times by the void cracks. However, he only left a few bloodstains, which was not a big deal. But at this moment, Han Fei's body appeared next to the blood demon. Someone shouted, "Not good. Sister Chow, retreat." Retreat? Han Fei's voice was cold, and a kitchen knife appeared in his hand. In the field, silver light bloomed, and the blood demon was cut into 2 pieces by Han Fei. Han Fei reached out, grabbed her Sun Moon shell, and stuffed it into his Forge the Universe. Han Fei narrowed his eyes. "Since you don't want to give it to me, I'll take it myself." Crack, crack. The rocks on the dome fell, and Han Fei didn't even look at them. He slapped the rubble into powder and intended to rush forward. Behind him, Chong Xiaochong sighed. "This is too domineering. When can I also force my way into the formation and fight 10 people alone?" Limelight 7 said, "Don't fight 10 people alone. Blast out the surrounding bloodworms first." A piece of the dome that was the size of a small mountain fell down, smashing into the blood tide. Chong Lulu shouted while controlling the boat, "Han Fei, stop fighting. If you keep fighting, we'll be eaten by the bloodworms." Why does the water in the blood pool seem to be dropping? Suddenly, even Han Fei realized that dozens of large vortexes suddenly appeared in this blood pool and were madly sucking the boat. Han Fei said to Chong Xiaochong via voice transmission, "Hold on. Don't panic. Only idiots will run out along the tributaries. After I kill these few, I will find a way to take you out." Outside, The entire mountain range was collapsing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Up until now, only 3 mountains were still standing. Even so, there were still rubble falling from these 3 mountains. At this time, everyone found that these 3 mountains were a little different. Although they were also collapsing, they were protected by a large formation. There seemed to be dragons lying on the ground, giving off a strong pressure. Suddenly, someone rushed out of one of the blood pools on a boat. While rushing and bombarding, a large number of bloodworms chased after him. The main reason was that the bloodworms were too densely packed. Both the White Armor Emperor and the Life Queen frowned. The boat didn't seem to be a rare treasure, and there were so many bloodworms that it was beyond the scope of the trial. The White Armor Emperor glanced at the Life Queen and slapped out. On the top of the 3 mountains, a dragon shadow tried to rush out. However, the dragon shadow seemed to be too weak to resist such a blow. With a beat, the 3 mountains exploded. At that time, Han Fei was standing in the air, holding the embroidery needle in his hand, and was fighting 1 against 5. Hey, let me ask you again, will you give it to me or not? If you don't, I will kill you immediately. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.